Ladies and gentlemen, we have a fantastic in-studio guest today. He has over 350,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, accomplished independent hip-hop musician. He's been exploring faith more, and we've been following each other on Instagram for a while, and I'm excited to be with him. Without any further ado, Mr. Nate Rose.
What's going on, bro? Happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Man, I'm pumped that you're here. I've been following you on Instagram for a while. I don't know if I may have followed you first, but I saw your stuff probably from like John Keith or like the Indie Tribe guys, and then I like clicked into it, and I was like, oh man, like this dude has a fire aesthetic, great sound, great look, especially as a fellow white rapper in recovery myself. I was like, yo, he's getting it. Like it's like you're nailing all the things. And we've been talking about potentially having you on, and you reached out. You sent me a project where you're kind of exploring the metaphysical and faith and all these different aspects. And so I'm excited to get into all that with you. But for folks who don't know who Nate Rose is, just give us like a brief introduction on you, a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so I've been making music for about 15 years, like pursuing it pretty heavily. I've been full-time for 6 now.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
so
awesome.
It took me like 8-9 years to kind of do that. So I went to college for music business, got a music business degree, and then became a social media and digital marketer in the corporate world. After that.
You in the corporate world.
Yeah,
huh?
whole time. Yeah, exactly. I worked at a company called Assurian.
Okay.
It was like a tech insurance company. And then from there, I was still doing music, and so I was just funneling my extra income into it, trying to build up. And eventually, you know, it was time to make that transition.
What was the tipping point for you to go from corporate America to finally doing it as a career?
Yeah, it was the point at which I was able to look at the amount of money that I was making and thinking if I had these same 40 hours, if I was able to reclaim the 40 hours and apply them to my own career, it would become more fruitful over time. So I actually suggest that artists like stay at whatever job they have for as long as they can, as long as it makes sense. And at some point it will just not make sense, but the expendable income, like, you know, if you're making more money on music, then you're just making more money overall, and you can actually, you know, put that back. So it's kind of like a dividend reinvestment.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. I was in a spot where I had about 6 months of living expenses saved. I was debt free, and I had a tour booked. So I knew there was money coming in, and I knew there was enough there. Yeah. Would you say you were in a similar spot where you had like the financial stability?
I mean, I could tell, specifics. I think at the time I was making 52 from the job. Okay. And this is back in like 2019. Okay. And basically at the start of working there, I was making like 30 off of music. And by the time I left, I was making like about 50 to 55. So it was more or less had matched, but you know, with the ability to reinvest all of that, that's kind of where it set off on that journey.
Yeah. Now, that's great money, especially 2019, like pre-inflation. That's solid money. In Nashville, or were you out at the time?
Yeah, I was in Nashville. Okay. We were living downtown.
Downtown, okay. So walk me through, I want to know 2 things. One, what did that break down to in terms of like you quit, you go 50K, you start making 50K a year, or whatever that 30K, like we'll break the revenue streams down. And then I'm curious, that 40 hours you got back when you finally quit your job, where that went into, where that time was now allocated to.
Yeah, for sure. So when I started making, you know, like I said, I left and I was probably making around 50 to 55. I was primarily making my money off of streaming revenue. Okay, great. And simultaneously, I also had a micro licensing situation with Artlist. And so this is before it got so saturated, and there's a lot of, you know, things with the micro licensing space that have changed. But there was a gold rush time, and so, you know, that was supplementing. I was probably making, you know, 15 to 20K off of Artlist on a yearly basis.
Okay, that's great. That's great money. So it's just streaming and syncs.
Streaming and syncs. Almost no money from live. Almost no money from merchandise or anything like that. Then publishing started to come into play, though. So once I started to expand out, I started to get, you know, PRO money, Sub Pub money.
And that's just straight like ASCAP and Sound Exchange money? Is that what you're talking about? Or
well, I mean, so I signed a deal with Exploration. It was just an admin deal. But Sub Pub actually makes me quite a bit of money, which is all the foreign collections agencies. So it's stuff that like they wouldn't even be hip to. So it's something that I guess they're going and get. I wouldn't be aware of how to go collect money from Switzerland for a commercial use or something like that. And so sometimes, you know, my checks from them, I expect something and I see something else. I mean, sometimes it can be like, yo, it was played on this television station and you gain, you know, $3,500 from this placement.
Wow.
And I don't even know it happens. You know what I mean?
Huh.
So
and
pretty cool.
That's outside of Sound Exchange, correct? And outside of ASCAP. Okay, you're gonna have to hit me with that. I just got hip to Sound Exchange like a year and a half ago.
Dude, to be completely honest, I don't know how I'm getting the placements. Like, you know, like, even with like PRO money, it's like you don't. I mean, if your music gets played in an arena,
right,
because somebody used it in a video for a walkout, you still get that money, even though you might not know it ever got played there.
Yeah. So our situation was that we had a great situation with, well, we do have a great situation with MusicBed, which is a bit more aggressive on the split. And then I just never set up my Sound Exchange. And then when I set up my Sound Exchange, like my first check started coming in.
Yeah.
And my quarterly checks now are still like pretty hefty 4-figure checks that come in every quarter. I'm like, oh, that's a nice surprise. You know, I'm thinking it's gonna be a couple $100, and it's like $5,000, $4,000 that just trickles in.
Yep.
And my stuff's not even like popping like that. Like you're at almost 350,000 monthly listeners. I'm at like 70 or something. You know, so like I'm just not even. I don't even understand all the revenue streams anymore. Like it's so many different revenue streams. You know?
Well, it's interesting because like the music landscape is changing. So there's all these new revenue models that have come up. So if you were to look at monthly listeners as a metric for how successful a career is, it wouldn't be a sufficient explanation.
Sure.
So you could look at somebody like Mark Rebier. Are you familiar with him? So he does a lot of live streams, kind of blew up during the pandemic, but he has a loop machine and he makes music like on the spot. He's a ridiculous musician.
Some of his stuff,
he like wears a robe and,
yes,
okay. So he only has at the time of this probably like 700,000 monthly listeners. So you might think that he's just like, you know, making maybe twice what I make. No, like he plays huge shows, and then when you start talking about the Twitch money, like he'll do these live busking performances where the average live viewership is 2,500, 3,000 people at a time. And, you know, the gifts and the... So, I mean, he's making way more, and he's probably getting 50, 60K a show type thing. And then I have another friend, I won't name names just so I can get specific with it, but I mean, he makes his lion's share of money on brand deals because he's big on TikTok. So he did 130K of brand deals last year.
That's awesome.
But he has like 90,000 monthly listeners.
Got you. Yeah, that's incredible. So when you said, okay, I made 30 here primarily off of syncs and Spotify, Apple Music, DistroKid money. I'm assuming you're DistroKid.
Yep.
I got 30 here. I'm making 50 at my job. If I get that 40 hours a week back,
by the time I left, it was 50.
50, it was even. Okay.
Yeah.
So if I get my 40 hours back, I can take that 40 hours and reallocate it into what?
Yeah. So I was trying to increase my output. So at this time, I've always kind of prided myself on doing everything myself.
Sure.
I was a little salty when Russ kind of got to put the flag in the ground.
I think many of us were salty when Russ... Because he like owned the whole thing.
He did, and I was like, dang it, like it's no longer cool, I guess. But so I was doing all my own mixes, graphics, doing my video editing, you know, the whole spectrum of...
Like a true DIYer.
Yeah, true DIY. Yes. All the marketing, at that time I was doing all my ad funnels and everything when that was working. So I leaned more into that, and eventually I started to realize I'm spreading myself thin and losing the passion for art, so I started to outsource.
Good.
And in the ways that made the most sense. But beyond that, I was downtown Nashville, so I was able to actually do more like in-person networking. So I was able to have networking events. I had meetings like 3-4 meetings a day.
Okay.
On average, you know what I'm saying? Just and I was in a good spot, so it's like people come to me, so I don't have to like travel and stuff.
Now, have you remained independent this entire time, or have you ever done a one-off deal, a single deal, anything like that?
Yeah, I have fully independent. I've done a couple like sync type deals for things that didn't really make that much sense. Like it wouldn't make sense now.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, fully independent. To be honest, I think I have a good enough understanding of the music marketing landscape, and especially now with the more that technology progresses, the more that the gatekeeping is removed, the barrier to entry is removed, and so the more power gets transferred to the independent artist. So I think increasingly so it becomes like unnecessary.
Yep.
And what's frustrating to me about a lot of the label deals that are being presented now is almost all of them are catalog buyouts, or it's a single that's already been doing well organically.
Correct.
And the money that they give you, what frustrates me is I used to be a social media director at a finance company, and I was, having conversations with the risk management VPs and stuff like that. So I'm hearing these conversations about what risk management is. And I know these types of conversations are happening at labels, right? Of course. So you're looking at how much you can spend on a particular single based on its trajectory, or a particular catalog based on its history. you're offering me amount of money that's safe.
Of course.
I've already taken all of the burden, you know what I'm saying? I've taken all the risk.
Yes.
You want to just buy it off me.
Yes.
Okay, now I have no more income coming in.
Yep.
And you feel confident, you can absorb the cost if something catastrophic happens. But if it doesn't, you're going to recoup in 2 years. You know what I'm saying? And so every label deal that has come my way has been like catalog acquisition without the idea of a partnership. And I'm like, I'm not interested in this at all. In fact, I find it offensive. Like, you want to piggyback off the success that I've had and take no risk and just, you know?
Yeah. You familiar with the one-off deal that Nick did for Pineapple?
Yes.
So I think that was one of the few things, and even that was like 6 figures, one song.
Yeah.
I think it was, I don't know if it was a master buyout or a licensing window. I don't remember which it was. And then the only thing is he couldn't drop songs for 90 days.
Yeah.
But that was his first break-off record, like that one that popped in Spotify. And then when he came back in 90 days, he just banger after banger after banger after banger after banger. And I do think it may have done something in the algorithm. I don't know if it really moved the needle for him.
Yeah.
But it did something. And then by the time he was out of that 90-day agreement to not put out any more music, I mean, he was out of there.
Yeah.
Like,
To be fair, if the deal is right, if the amount of money is right, if the opportunity is right, I'm not anti.
Sure.
So I think in his situation, I feel like we have a pretty similar perspective around being an independent artist, and obviously he's a lot further along than I am in terms of career success. But I think our litmus test is roughly the same. So I probably would have made a decision like that at the time as well.
Yeah, so you pivot away from working your full-time job, and then it allows you to take more meetings and just kind of be more in the mix. And where is your
increasing the output also?
And the output.
The output
so
of
tell me the
music,
output. How much would you able to increase? This is 2019, right? You said?
2019. So I was releasing more or less like a song every 3 weeks. And now, granted, the mix and master process was one of the first things that I started outsourcing because it was the biggest bottleneck for me. Because my mixes were never up to par with Drake's. So it would always be mix V3, V4, V5, V6, you know. And that was the big one because my technical skill set was not up to par with the product I was trying to get. But
you know, the tricky part about mixing, I just had a conversation about this, is like mixing matters until it doesn't. Like, it matters until like Kendrick puts out Not Like Us and it's just awful mix, terrible mix, and no one cares.
You know what I think? I actually would venture to say I disagree with that a little bit.
Okay.
I think that it is like I've heard this analogy of baking a cake. So if you bake a cake and the eggs are bad, then the end consumer, someone who's not a chef, not attuned to what that is, it's a bad cake. And so I think the mix is a very underrated part that brings this kind of polished product and perception of high quality. So with Kendrick, he can get away with it because first off, there's this cultural moment around it, but secondly, his rapping is just that good, and the energy is just that good.
Sure.
And if it would have had a better, like, also Kendrick doesn't need that perception of, you know, he can do an untitled, unmastered,
which were poorly mixed too. Those
right,
those are not good.
But to be honest though, like,
it doesn't
they're
matter.
harder. Well, I mean, I would say they're. I don't revisit them as much as the rest of his projects because they're not as.
You know, that's a great point. That's actually a good point, because I do think that. So this is what I would my thoughts go. Better a B- C+ mix and a ton of output than like a A+ mix and a little output.
There's a balance for sure.
Sure,
I mean, I definitely don't think if you're not bringing in money, you should.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, because I, as a guy who went to audio engineer school and did the thing, I still fantasize like, oh, like, I wonder if I can get an SSL, but just a 16 channel one, just so that I can get the rig to run all the circuitry through and get the EQ of the SSL with the right. And then it's like my engineer is like, no, like you don't need to do that. Like, it sounds
also
fine.
the in the box plugins are
amazing.
So good now.
Yeah.
I think how I look at my career now is if you're in a 3, 4, 5, 600,000 monthly listener area, right? You are a professional artist.
Yes.
We're already dealing with the margins, right? So you have to look at the totality of your career and find those weak points where there can be the most like gap bridged.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
The biggest ROI.
Well, it doesn't even necessarily have to be. I would say ROI not in terms of finances, but ROI in terms of brand perception.
Okay.
Like so for example, if I'm like, okay, my vocal control is good, like I'm really getting there, but I was looking and you can compare yourself in this way. It's like I think a healthy way to compare yourself to your peers, because I was looking at Dylan and John, and no big deal, and John Keith, and I was like, oh man, their fashion is really on a next level. And I'm seeing, even, I know them personally, we're actual real life friends, but I'm seeing the perception that I'm having viewing them at this event looking like this. And so I'm like, oh yeah, this is like an area that I'm not excelling at. And so I start to like, okay, let me start looking into what things I like in fashion. And that becomes a new artistic pursuit. But I think that mixing, there are things that are on the margins there where it's like microphone quality or mixing or whatever. Like, okay, to back up, my top song is Curious George, my #1 stream song. I don't really like that song. I almost didn't put it out. I did everything on that record, produced it, mixed and mastered it, whatever. It's not that crazy. It did well, but commercial success is not my metric for success in that way.
Sure.
I'm looking at like, am I making the artistic product that I want to make?
Okay.
And so, you know.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me this. Have you felt like you've been able to get folks from your socials, your Instagram? I didn't look at your TikTok.
Yeah.
But your Instagram looks great. You're shooting really cool stuff. Have you been able to get folks from Instagram to your Spotify and actually move the needle in a significant way? Or is a lot of your love coming from just consistently releasing on Spotify and letting that algorithm serve up your stuff, building the followers there, and doing that release radar drop, whatever percentage of your followers get that song, and then it just kind of feeds itself?
Yeah. I think the Spotify ecosystem is definitely working in my favor. That's probably the strongest point for me.
That's awesome.
But I will say there's been different times where different things have worked. So at one time, Artlist was driving, the placements I was getting via Artlist were driving a ton of traffic. So the Ace family, for example, would use my song in something, and I would just see a huge uptick in a song. And then, you know, I have hundreds of YouTube comments flooding on my music videos, came here from.
Wow, okay.
You know, so there was that driver at one point. That's fallen off a little bit.
Sure.
Then, you know, there was a period of time before Apple removed what type of data could be utilized for advertising. There was a time where advertising was really potent, and so then I had built an entire ad funnel with retargeting and custom audiences and lookalike audience for garnering new people and sending them directly to Spotify, which also spiked the algorithm. So there were different times, right? Now around this, you know, album rollout, I'm focused more heavily on content and PR.
What do you mean by content?
Literally just visual content. Obviously, we know it like
just like good performance shots of the songs.
Performance shots are part of it. I think there's a lot of untapped potential as far as what type of format a video can fit into a short form thing. And I think we're still in a little bit in the Wild West of figuring out what that is.
So tell me this. Have you been able to write this? Like, this is Nick's advice to me, and I always go, I don't know how to do this.
Write
Nick.
the song based on the content.
Bro, it is so difficult for me. And I almost feel like folks who made music prior to TikTok are at a disadvantage because my brain just doesn't work that way. Whereas folks who started making music as TikTok was taking off, like Nick really gave it a shot in 2019, around the same time you're going full time, right? And so Nick gives it a shot as well. And then I think folks that came in like after TikTok was already a thing, right? Because he pops off in 2 years, 2021, Fine Apple. And then it's just a muscle for him. Right? And then you see the Connor Prices, the Grams, the Jakes, like all those kids, not kids, all those guys are like, they're just think in a way that is already in product. How can I be disruptive, make something interesting and entertaining? And it is difficult for me. So have you been able to actually like visualize the idea, how it's going to hit on socials and writing songs around that?
I take a different perspective than Nick D on this, but this is just I think a personal preference thing. I think he approaches, and he said this, that he approaches things more from, I treat it like a business first.
Yes.
I don't treat it like a business first.
Okay.
I'm an artist, and that's, and I'm not, this is not to say that Nick D is not an artist.
But multiple people have had this pushback of him, so he wouldn't take it personally.
Fair. Okay. Yep. So like I said, I like his music, but for me, Rick Rubin had a quote that you know, music is an offering to God, or that another Rick Rubin quote, which is essentially that you should only think about, like, you shouldn't consider the end user when you're creating, because any deviation from your artistic vision is serving commerce rather than art. And so for me, I'm creating the whole reason I wanted to make music for a living is not for the living part. Like it was to make music. Like, and so if I start making things that compromise what I want to do with my art in order to serve the commerce, then I mean, I could have had a much easier pathway to that. So even on the video side, what works with Nick D and Hunter Graham and Connor Price and stuff, you know, the sketches or some of the more candid stuff, that doesn't fit the brand or the visual that I like, even though I know that those things are conducive to capturing audience and whatever.
That's fair.
But I also co-own a media company and do a lot of music videos, a lot of work in the comedy space. I have a passion also for the visual. Okay. And so I just, you know, I'm taking the longer way, but it's for artistic fulfillment on my part.
So I guess my question would be, why the artistic fulfillment? Like, why? You know what I mean? Because okay, let me give you an example.
Sure.
So I was with my buddies, Dirt Poor Robins. You would probably really like them. I was telling you a little bit about them off camera.
Yeah.
And so they were talking about this idea of like not making art as quote unquote propaganda pieces to like articulate a worldview, and just making art for art's sake or whatever. And I'm just like, but at the end of the day, everything is driving worldview. At the end of the day, every piece of media has an agenda behind it.
I would actually venture to say, like, what is art without a worldview behind it?
What is art without a message behind it? Yeah. Without something. What was the movie we just reacted to, Zach? On the Ex Machina. Have you seen this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ex Machina.
That's crazy.
We looked at an analysis of it and we reacted to it. That was what we were working on before you got here. And it absolutely has an agenda it's driving. Yeah. Right? So it's like, this idea of like, you know, we shouldn't make propaganda, and I get it, like especially some of the stuff from really on the nose music. That's what we call it. Like, and I struggle with this as well, because I'm closer to where you are than where Nick is in terms of just like, I just want to make what I want to make. Yep. And I hope people like it. But at the same time, I'm also like, there has to be an ROI to it. Like, it has to make sense on paper. Right now, we're fortunate in that, like, it's breaking even. Like, what comes in from DistroKid and MusicBed pretty much covers what it costs for me to make a couple songs a month. Right. With mixing, videos, yada, yada. But it's not necessarily moving the needle in any significant way. It's probably because I'm also not getting stuff to MusicBed around the time of the drops and trying to that. So I guess like the deeper question is like, what is the artistic, like, what is the reason beneath the reason for you? Well,
it's just the passion that I have. I would say that I feel content in life. I've reached a certain level of income. I mean, you surely make a lot more than I do, but I've reached a place where I more or less have the things that I need and that I want. And
so you're come on more like a minimalist, live a quiet life, simple.
Not necessarily. Okay. It's just I no longer have this drive or ambition attached to the pursuit of like
monetary gain
or status in that way.
Sure. The status is definitely something that I think messes up a lot of artists. Like wanting the clout, wanting the recognition. Yeah. Most of that stuff's not good for you, right?
So in that way, I would say it's simple. Okay. Like, it's simple. Like,
you're not doing it for clicks and like for attention necessarily.
No. Okay. No, I don't think so.
So what is the fulfillment of it? Like, what is a driver behind expressing yourself?
So one is I just have so much fun making music. It's just a pure expression. I create the type of music that I wish existed. Okay. You know, I'm like, man, what would, you know, Kendrick and John Bellion and my favorite artists in these different spheres, what would music like that sound like? It's like, you know, I have kind of
that's how you would describe it, as Kendrick and John.
I mean, that's giving myself way too much credit.
Top of funnel.
But yeah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I would say this new project is I think it would fit somewhere in between those two.
I feel like your stuff is the stuff you sent me. I listened through maybe the first 3 or 4 records, and I was like, oh, this is fairly commercial though. Like, it's mainstream enough where I think it works within those ecosystems.
We'll see if the content is.
That's true. That's true.
But
so artistic fulfillment.
In addition to the artistic fulfillment conversation, I think there are also messages that I just want to convey, and there's a certain timbre to music that is kind of, there's a vacuum for. Okay. That it's like, I have conversations with my real life friends, and I'm like, why is the things that I actually care about in real life, why is that not like being forefront and present in my art that 100% should be. So that was kind of a shift that I had that kind of led to this album a little bit, is like, what are the conversations that I feel like culturally need to be had, and how do I express those through my gift? You know, I was thinking when I started doing this podcast, one of the ancillary effects of doing a podcast that I have called Thick as Thieves with my business partner, one of the ancillary effects is like, oh, I'm going to become more comfortable on camera, you know, and I at the time I was starting to really dig into philosophy and get really interested in philosophy and theology. And so somebody like a Jordan Peterson, I'm like, man, you know, maybe after working on this for 20 years, like maybe I could you know, speak as eloquently as him about, and as deeply as him about some of these issues. But then, you know, I'm like, well, Jordan Peterson's actual gift is speech. He was a professor. Like, he stands on stage and he talks for hours. But he could never make a rap song like I could make a rap song. And that speaks to a different audience. And so that was kind of a point where I'm like, oh, well, I can fill a gap with the things that I find important through my channel, through my art. So that I would say is
so you're like
a big
Jordan
fulfilling purpose.
You're like the Jordan Peterson of rap.
I mean, again, giving myself a lot of credit. Maybe, you know, you can be the judge of that, I guess. But
okay,
but
I like it. I like how you're thinking about yourself in the grand scheme.
Well, can I say, like, somebody like a John Bellion feels that. I think that he makes really deep songs about culture. You know, life became dangerous the day we all became famous. No one cares if you're happy, just as long as you claim it. You know, maybe, I don't know, super deep record. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Okay, different, slightly different worldview, but a project that had all the depth that, you know what I'm saying, you would want to expect out of somebody who has something to say. And in contrast, I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but in contrast, I listened to Utopia, and I'm like, Travis Scott, dog, you got children, you're nearing 40 years old. We're still talking about twin bitches hopping off a jet ski. Like, that's what we're still talking about, bro. So for me, I'm like, now my passion for diving into philosophy is also aligned with my passion for creating music in a way that just like the synergy of all these things in my life funneling into the art, and also how it translates to my interpersonal relationships. Like, the word alignment is very loaded spiritually, you know, but that's the best word I think I have to describe it, where all elements of my life are kind of moving towards a similar goal or endpoint.
I like that. I think that's super interesting, refreshing. I am a big fan of John. I think John Bellion makes very cool music, and I think I love this George Danko pod. I don't know if you saw any of that. I thought that was really good, and just his breakdown of the music industry and the pressure it puts on creatives and how oppressive it is. Even the live, like, the exposure to the Live Nation contracts, which I want to bounce something off of you later in that conversation when we come back to it, because I have a really hot take on that. I'm really curious if you're gonna like. But so I like John. I couldn't stand a Mr. Morale in the Big Steppers album. Here's why. I can't detangle worldview from art. So, like, if your worldview to me is one of, I'm gonna use a bunch of buzz terms you may hate.
No, go ahead.
One of Marxism, one of forms of hedonism, even if it's just confessions of hedonism, and then one on moral subjectivity, right? Like postmodernism in the realist sense. One of your truth, right? Like, it's like your truth. One of, in my opinion, of kind of playing into the culture with the Auntie Diaries record of like, my auntie's a man now. It's like, bro, this is the most cringe cliche thing any rapper could have ever said, and now you're the poster child of this. Like, he's so, you know, and then the spiritual relative aspect of Eckhart Tolle, like, just immersed in that entire paradigm, and then you get into the who Eckhart Tolle is, what Eckhart Tolle believes about consciousness, God, the universe. You are God. You are the universe. The universe is one. God is in you. Therefore, you are God. I just think it's straight poison. Like, straight poison. And so I struggle with, like, detangling that. In the same way, I don't rock with R. Kelly. I can't listen to R. Kelly, right? I have trouble, and I'll be honest, this might be, I can't listen to XXX. Like, I think he makes really great art, but, like, when that documentary came out and it was more or less confirmed that he did what he was alleged to do towards that girl and all that stuff, I can't detangle this. Because it is, the worldview is driving the art, you know? And so Kendrick is someone to me that like Good Kid, Mad City, Section 80, Christian Corinthians, right? Like this is someone that had a grasp of who Christ was, and then like completely drifted into nonsense.
So I love Mr. Morale. It's probably one of my favorite albums of all time.
Of all time?
Yeah. But the reason I say this though is because though this is even true on the philosophical side. Like I'm listening to a Tim Keller sermon on the way here. I'm listening to Sam Harris's takes on consciousness on the way out. Or, you know, Bernardo Kastrup or whatever. And I'm trying to just, you know, flip rocks over. You know, if it's the pursuit of truth, then there's really nothing to be afraid of. Now, what I would say as far as the artistic portion of it, I love how Mr. Morale was such, though we differ in worldviews, to whatever extent that may be, the way he was able to communicate this through art is what is so incredible.
I see what you're saying.
I was like,
so you're saying you have,
you know, so the I forgot that. Oh,
I like the opening song, like the. What did you come in? Like that's probably to me like okay that slaps. But I would just say the rest of it I just didn't sonically like it. Like I was like because people were like oh it's deep and it's he's so vulnerable and it's therapy rap and blah 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 and it's like but it just didn't sound good to me either.
I like the sonics, but I also like James Blake. You know I like a little bit of a weird timbre to stuff.
Okay.
So but what I would say is you know something like is it We Cry Together the whole argument song. So he starts it off saying, "This is what the world sounds like," and then it's a man and a woman having a conversation that initially starts in terms of like a relationship back and forth, but eventually towards the end starts getting into you know perspectives of how men are viewing women and women are viewing men, and you know I'm sure you may have a different way you would put that forth, but I think the format by which he communicated those ideas was awesome.
So I think the format in which he communicated those ideas were awesome. However, sonically. Like the piercing of the tonal quality of the tone he's rapping in and the tone she's rapping in, just sonically was like someone needed to go in.
That's not a song you revisit that often.
That's what I'm saying.
No, but that was a performative theater piece. You have that. You also have the records that do have replay value.
Name a record from Mr. Morale that you thought like it still has replay value and people are still listening to it right now.
No. Whether or not people are listening to it right now is different. This is my taste, bro.
Okay.
A bunch of them.
Okay,
but
which one?
So I think N95 has a lot of commercial appeal. I love the intro.
Refresh me of N95. Which one?
Take out the foo-foo. Take out the cloud chase. Right. But then there's a lot of pop records. The pop record with Blast on it. Father Time I think is a beautiful record.
Okay.
I love the message of that one. I had a turbulent relationship with my father, and I think that, you know, overall, it's like, hey, we need fathers to like.
Fair.
It just kind of exploring how you know those things get passed down.
So you named two, and I would agree on those two. And I would say the intro I think is a fun record to come back to. I think but that's two versus like.
Do you like? I hope I'm not too late. To set my demons straight.
I don't like that record.
Okay.
Versus Damn or Good Kid, Mad City, like there's multiple records that like still.
I'm a huge Kendrick fan. Good Kid, Mad City is another one of my favorites of all time. So I'm not, you know, look. I think
I'm saying in comparison to Damn, I just feel like Damn was just his best record.
I think it's just my own personal sonic taste, you know, and I think, but as far as the artistic nature of it, I'm looking at how effectively he's able to communicate a message in a way that's not direct and on the nose. So even something like How Much a Dollar Costs from To Pimp a Butterfly, which I'm sure you probably have all sorts of qualms with, but it's a parable song.
I get it.
You know, which I'm like, that's. I mean, you could just be like,
it's vulgar, it's nasty.
But it has.
You could dismiss it as that.
It has a different. It's like this song is just him telling a story about him pulling up to the gas station and a homeless guy asking him for money and constantly, like, I just think that. The way his brain works about like, all right, like I have this message I want to tell. Now, how do I tell it in the most creative way? I think that is really, really cool.
So, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I guess my thing is seeing his worldview drift further and further into nonsense.
Hey, I feel you on that, bro.
I just go,
I feel you on that.
Bro, this is not good. You know, that's my qualms with it. But I understand what you're saying. And obviously after Morale, and the Drake back and forth, he put to bed any reservations that I had.
Yeah, with just the way he
can't make replayable, fun music. Like, I think when he did, no, I'm saying he shut me up.
Shut you up. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, because I was like, the first couple records he put out in that Drake back and forth, I was like, this is boring.
Yeah.
And then when he finally gets to Not Like Us, I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
And there was rumors that he's been sitting on that for years. That was the record that he's been sitting on for years.
That's wild.
Yeah, because Top tweeted I See Dead People, Kendrick or whatever, like 3 months ago, before any of this hit the fan. So they're saying he might have swapped out some of the lines last minute, but that he had been sitting on that Not Like Us record.
Yeah.
And that was the record that everyone was like, Drake was like, you got a 4-year diss song or whatever. And so I think that is like where I go, okay, I'm wrong about him as an art. Because I thought like some of his like artsy fartsy, you're just trying to be super deep and it's just not fire to me. And then he like reminded me like, no, I could still make.
Yeah.
I could still make the big record.
Yeah.
You know?
To give Kendrick another piece of credit on Mr. Morale is just the boldness. Like I've always just appreciated the boldness because, and you can probably just relate to that in general. I mean, you have a podcast where you're like, yo, we gonna talk about the things that people are afraid to talk about.
Yeah.
Now I will say, I know that your criticism for say on Auntie's Diaries or something like that, it's like that's more of a safer position in terms of the current cultural climate.
Very safe.
However, there are a lot of things that I don't think are particularly safe.
Okay, give me one example.
Well, I mean, even in Auntie's Diaries, like dropping the F-bomb.
Oh, sure.
You know what I'm saying? Or things like that. But even just the boldness to just, I mean, to me, it's like he is making art regardless of the perception on the back end. It's like, I have these things that I want to say. It just feels like true artistry to me.
You don't think there's any degree of Auntie Diary, what's the word I'm looking for? Feeding the zeitgeist that's already here.
I don't know. That all depends on.
I'm gonna say something even deeper and virtue signaling.
Yeah, I would say that all depends on. I can't answer that.
Of his intent.
Of his intent.
It's just the timing of it is just very odd.
You
know what I mean?
Yeah,
like had he said that 10 years ago, I would have been like, respect. Like I would have been like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
But like at least you were early to the party.
But the format of the sorry to quench my thirst right quick.
Very good.
No, but the format of the project is him going through this therapy session and just kind of diving into all these things. And he's saying, I've been gone. I've been gone from the cultural conversation because I'm trying to figure things out. Okay. And I think that like he's just touching on a piece that this is his take on this cultural conversation that's been happening for the past 5 years, you know? And so I don't think it necessarily says that. Just because you touch a topic that is being talked about and you have the same a similar position.
But he affirms the topic in a way that every purple-haired leftist goofy.
But at least he expounds upon the reason for that belief being through a personal story. Like what I'm saying is he could also land on that side without just virtue signaling. You know what I'm saying? I don't
know, man. I don't know. Now, in contrast to Good Kid, Mad City, Pimp a Butterfly, and Damn, which all have, this is going to be a hot take, but have very conservative angles to the content, I don't know if Kendrick lands in that same place if the culture wasn't already there. That's my opinion.
Well, yeah,
you know?
Maybe. But I mean, I don't, a lot of people did not like Mr. Morale. A lot of people thought the whole therapy angle was kind of weird.
It's a lot of people, It's a little late.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like Jay-Z did the same concept on 444, and that came out 2018.
Yeah,
almost the same, like not the same format as a concept record, but very similar in terms of therapy and dealing with my issues and my all the struggles I have. So it's just a little late to me.
Okay, that's fair. So, that's fair.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. So.
Oh, real quick, I was going to throw in this little John Bellion anecdote. I actually met my wife at a John Bellion concert in 2016. So shout out my wife. Shout out my wife. But no, I was selling CDs in line.
You were selling
and she drove 7 hours from South Mississippi to Nashville to the show. Now, this is an exit in. The cap was like 500 capacity show.
Wow.
And I'm selling CDs in line. I'm playing my music for people on I literally went there because I like John Bellion, and I was like, there would probably be some fan crossover, so I can go hustle, make a little bit of money. And I ended up meeting her and her friend group, and we kind of connected. And then, after a FaceTime call, it was just.
How long y'all been married?
Well, we've been married for 1 year, but we've been together for 7, and we've lived together and for 7 years.
Okay.
So,
Very
yeah,
cool.
it's
Wow.
been
Interesting.
a long one.
So, hold on. Let me.
Mhm.
All right. So you were telling me a little offline how you've made music that you kind of thought would work, right? At times. And now you've kind of pivoted and shifted over into like making music that's more and more meaningful to you.
Yeah.
Right. So can you unpack that a little bit in terms of like what caused that shift, like to go from like, let me actually get into the core of what I want to talk about and take people deeper.
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of things that pointed to that. I would say that there was so early on in my music career, I wrote from a place of pain. And so I had a lot of authentic messages. If you go back to like a lot of my earlier stuff is I was wrestling with a lot of personal things, relationship dynamics, all those sorts of things. And then once I got to a more stable place, I started to not necessarily know where to pull the inspiration from. And so I think what ended up coming into that, because I didn't just stop making music, was more or less just like making music that just sounds good. You know what I mean? Just sounds cool, sounds good. And yeah, I think I was making that for a while. I tried to do this thing. I was into finance. And so I tried to, part of like the branding for me is I was like, all right, I'm going to put these like finance topics into music in a way that, can kind of still hold up as a rap record, but still has these finance topics, because this was a period of time where I was really into that. But beyond that, I mean, I think all of this just kind of happened organically with my own kind of journey philosophically, hand in hand with a lot of like ego dissolution, another loaded term, but just in the truest sense of the phrase. As I became less egocentric and focused on myself and myself as the centerpiece of everything, I started to, really dig into what types of things are meaningful in life. And all of a sudden I'm just, inspiration is just coming from all different angles, because it just kind of, it lifts the veil. Cause if I'm focused on looking cool and appearing a certain way to an audience or whatever, I'm very limited on what types of things I can say. Cause then even within the cultural conversation, what am I going to be allowed to say that will come off somewhat authentic? You know what I mean? Like I can't, talk. I'm not going to make a song over a drill beat and talk about killing people like that. That's not going to translate, because I don't live that lifestyle. So even within that standard bag of rap topics, you get even siphoned more into this. But when you start to when it becomes no longer about you and how you're going to be perceived and whatever, it starts to just open you up to really being authentic, because now you're talking about things you actually care about. That's
really cool. I think the rap is in an interesting place in general right now. That is like it's just in a tough place as a genre. I think that's tricky, and I think less and less of it is becoming as popular as it was, say, 5 years ago.
Sure.
So then to navigate these topics in a way that is true to who you are, but at the same time appealing. And I always used to say that like the stuff that leads to great art leads to a terrible life, And so like the stuff that like making music from a place of pain and hurt can make for great art, but then you stay in that mess and you never heal. And then your life sucks, And if you look at like some of our greatest artists, they're often the most tormented. They struggle. They really go through it.
Yeah.
And it's finding that like, all right, now I'm in a good place. Like now I'm happily married, and like I'm financially stable, and I have a career, and I have good friends and a community that loves me. How do you make art from that can be tricky for a lot of people.
Well, I don't think it's one or the other, but I just think that you have, just based on the type of what's the word? Like the personality predisposition of people who are overly artistic. Like the trade-off to that is like a little less grasp on the reality.
Sure.
So I think that because of that, a lot of great art does come, but these people are having trouble working things out in their brain, because it's just signals popping off all the time.
Yeah.
I think that I'm a little bit more balanced, I think, on the artistic and business front, for better or for worse. That's not putting myself on a pedestal there, but just I think I can kind of have a foot in either. But I will say that I've become far more artistic when I finally gave myself permission to create freely and be authentic. I mean, to me, then it's just like everything about my life and the things that I value can now just be put into the art, which gives it so much more meaning and backing. And I think that if you look at like, I've become fascinated with Renaissance artwork. And looking at cathedrals. I went to a cathedral in New York. I forgot the name of it, St. Paul or something like that. And I just remember when I walked in there, I had this moment where there was a fear component and there was an awe to it. And it was all of that. It was just so beautiful and so magnificent and large, and it had that ego dissolution effect to a small degree. And I was like, oh, this is what it meant to create art for something that is beyond yourself. This is what they did. This is like, hey, yeah, this cathedral isn't going to be completed for 500 years, but we're going to make it anyway because this is not about the individual artist, you know. Good. And so, but like if we look back at all the greatest art pieces, you know, when you think about the ones that have stood the test of time, almost all of them have something like magnificent about it that seems like it was driven from a place that superseded the self.
Yeah, I mean, and it's shooting for something higher, and it's shooting for capturing goodness and reflecting a narrative that's beyond just this material world.
Well, look at the Kendrick Drake beef, right? That is culturally, I mean, that captured culture for 4 months, you know, because there was this time elapsed in between, and when's they going to respond and this and that. But when time goes on, 200 years in the future, where nobody knows the cultural significance today of Kendrick and Drake in this moment and everything that came along with that, you're just left with like what they're saying, and it's like this diss that you don't relate to the like. I don't know why.
I wonder if people look at the Biggie and Tupac situation like the fans of rap today look at the Biggie and Tupac situation like.
But the people that are paying attention to the Biggie and Tupac situation live through it and have the cultural context. Yeah. So I think they will. Yeah. I think they will. But I'm saying, ask a Gen Z person like, yo, dude, like, the Biggie and Tupac, like they might not even know what the records are. Right. You know, but definitely they don't know all of the tension that existed between East and West Coast. And like I was sixth grade, 6th or 7th grade when Tupac died. 6th grade when Tupac died, and I think Biggie died that same school year. And I remember crying when Tupac died. Wow, like it like messed me up. And I was keeping up in real time with everything when Tupac went to jail, why he went to jail, why he got as in 5th and 6th grade this stuff was happening. Yeah. So I was really on top of everything. Back then. Yeah. So now like you talk to a John Keith, right? Who's a little, well, he's not a little, he's probably a little younger than you, much younger than me. And he's like, I don't get it. Yeah. You know? Well, not to go all Jordan Peterson on you, but like when after time has elapsed, all you're left with when the cultural context is gone is the narrative substructure. So it's like, how strong is that? Okay, we're just talking about this guy is into pedophilia and this guy beat his wife and I don't know who these people are and that speaks nothing to me. Like, you know?
Yeah, that's good. So tell me a bit more of your faith journey and your background, because did you grow up in the faith?
I grew up Christian.
Okay, what was that like?
I would say that my parents weren't. They were kind of cultural Christian. I would say. I feel we went through the movements. Okay. You know, I was exposed to the stories. Obviously, you know, as an adult, you interpret these stories with more depth.
Like you guys went to church every Sunday, or like
sometimes there were periods of time where we would
stints of consistent church attendance.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Was there ever were your mom and your dad together during your childhood?
Yeah, until I was 15.
Okay, so majority of the time, mom and dad in the same home. Yeah. Okay, was there ever did dad sit down and read the Bible with Nate? No. Did mom sit down and read the Bible?
No,
with Nate?
my house, my parents were not meant for each other. Okay. So it was
pretty rough marriage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely took 15 years on the basis of we have to hold on for kids.
You know? Siblings? You guys have siblings? How
many? 2. So my brother who you met earlier,
younger.
He's a younger brother. He's 8 years younger than me, and my sister's 3 years younger than me. So,
so I'm the oldest. You're the oldest. Oh wow. Yeah. So when they split, your brother was 7, 8?
Yeah, like 8 years old. Oof. Yeah.
That's a tough time. Yeah. 15, you're a little more
15
adjusted. And
plus, you know, as it goes with being young, it's just I was in my own world. I mean, I wrestled with, but the reality is, I may have had, I wouldn't say a harder time, but the writing was on the wall for me. Like, to me, it wasn't a shock at all. Like, it was just kind of, I just now have to adjust to this because, like, you know, I saw my parents fighting all the time.
How was that adjustment?
It was what it was. It was, I don't know. I don't feel like it actually had that much of an impact on me just because the ways in which the relationships affected me, like this was just an ancillary thing that happened. Like, you know, that was the tip of the iceberg. That's yeah. Okay. So it didn't feel like, oh no, like my parents don't love each other anymore. It's like, yeah, that ship had sailed.
Okay. You knew that the writing was on the wall for their marriage, unfortunately.
For sure. For sure. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Would you say it affected your siblings different?
I think so. But even my brother, I mean, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I think my brother was also kind of in his own world a little bit. It for sure had an effect on an 8-year-old, you know, to some degree. Yeah. So I don't know what he would say about that, or maybe I don't know if he's worked those things out or not.
I was 6 when my dad left, 6 months after we came to America. So there was like the tension of coming to a new nation, all that kind of stuff. And there was a time, like that early on, I don't think my brain fully understood, on top of missing my father, like who was like close, you know, and the superhero, like dad was a superhero at 6, you know.
Yep.
And then there was also like a bizarre guilt and shame that I held for, like it was my fault almost, you know, that like I didn't really unpack until like I was an adult. And it definitely did a number on me at a younger age where I don't know if maybe if I was a teenager it'd be different, you know, it'd just be more like oh gosh, I get 2 rooms now, and it's like an inconvenience of like you're not seeing that as much, you know. That's interesting. Okay, so family goes to church occasionally. Sometimes they have stints going to church. You grow up more or less Christian, and then over time you kind of deconvert, kind of flow.
Not really. I was never like disenfranchised. I never had a cynical perspective around religion. Okay. I literally think I was just so heavily focused on my career.
Okay.
Trying to be a rapper, dealing with really bad relationships that blew up. You know, I was just kind of more or less agnostic and just not paying attention to it for a decade.
Wow.
And so, yeah. And to be honest, you know, I probably could have used some of that insight during some of the darkest periods of my life. But, yeah, eventually, you know, in any time it would kind of creep up where I need to explore this a little bit more, I kind of, my attitude towards it was like, oh, I'm going to be the guy that just figures it out. I'm going to be the guy that finally figures out the answers. And, you know, these debates have been happening forever and whatever. And then, you know, eventually I was like, well, that's just not a sufficient answer to be like, this is hard. Like, I have no basis for a worldview at all around this because I refuse to explore anything. And so part of that started that journey as well. So
now, fast forward, you are, where would you say you are with God? Because from my understanding, you go to church with some of the indie tribe guys. You have a lot of Christian friends. You know, you're in very similar circles. Your music's has some profanity in it, but that's I don't freak out as much about profanity. You know, but where would you say you are now with faith?
Well, I would say I'm pretty squarely on board with the Judeo-Christian value system.
Okay.
I think that I definitely wouldn't fully consider myself a Christian. Like I definitely haven't bridged the gap on certain things enough to say that. I would say that I believe it's more likely than not that there's a God.
So you'd hit me with the Jordan Peterson line if Alex O'Connor asked him if we would have a video camera, go back in time at the tomb of Joseph.
Okay, so as far as the historical stuff, you know, apologetics and all, like I haven't even crossed that threshold yet. I started all the way back at metaphysics.
Okay,
I'm like I need to be convinced whether or not a God could exist,
a spiritual realm exists at all.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Okay,
exactly. So
and you are convinced that there is a spiritual realm now.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
I think so. And you know, interestingly enough, Bernardo Kastrup, he's a guy I really like. He's a philosopher. His philosophy is analytical idealism, but he had a PhD in philosophy and a PhD in computer science and worked at CERN, and so he kind of blends these two things, and he has some pretty compelling cases for idealism, even with, you know, bringing into it arguments, analytical arguments and philosophical arguments, as well as just like popular science and things like that. And then somebody like Stephen Meyer, you know, speaking to DNA, and John Lennox, you know what I'm saying?
So it sounds like you're a theist now.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then when it comes specifically, again, the question that Alex O'Connor just posed to Jordan Peterson, not sure if you saw that.
Yeah.
If we had a time machine and a video camera and we were to go back in time, stand at the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea,
yes,
and would we see a bodily, physically risen Jesus coming out of the tomb?
I would say I haven't even given that a look.
Okay.
So to say one or the other,
Okay.
it would feel inauthentic.
Jordan Peterson said, "I suspect so," which I thought was a great answer. I suspect so.
Yeah.
That's great. So,
but I will say, I mean, a point by way of, for Christianity is like, I'm so on board with some of these themes and the framework for how to live a purposeful life, and that it's like, well, it's pretty calibrated to truth as it stands. So
it sounds like your worldview, like worldview apologetics, you're like you're there from a worldview standpoint, but when you get into the nitty gritty of the actual apologetics of like the bodily resurrection, the reliability of the New Testament, so on and so forth, you just haven't examined.
I just haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
I'm still trying to really dig into,
what's the biggest? What would you say is the biggest hang up for you?
Well, I would have said that bridging the gap from a non-personal to a personal God.
Okay.
But then, within this the current framework of which I feel good about, I'm like, if we are made in the image of God, why would our consciousness be so catered towards relationships, and that would just be absent from an intelligent creator if we're made in his image, or in an Eastern spiritual context if we are made of the same a limited version of the same conscious.
I love that you added limited. That's good.
Yeah.
Limited. Because
as Bernardo would say, a dissociative boundary.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like I just keep asking you questions, and you're going to sort this out in this conversation. We're going to close you on Jesus by the end of this.
Yeah. No, hey, perhaps, bro.
Okay.
I'm with it.
So you went from deist to you went from agnostic to deist. So from deist to theist, a personal God exists that wants to engage with us.
Well, I don't know. I haven't fully made that leap to personal God for sure.
Okay, a God that has an opinion about how you and I are to live our life. A relational God?
I think the relational God, more I have a hang up with a God that intervenes in the life of humans. So that's more of the one I have to kind of ruminate on. That's another frontier.
Okay. Do you pray?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I on occasion. Sometimes it feels inauthentic for me to pray.
That's
and
fair.
At other times I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm really trying to because I don't feel like I'm in that space yet.
Sure.
So sometimes it does feel a little like awkward for me, knowing that I'm like, hey, I haven't fully submitted myself to this.
Okay.
So doing it feels a little authentic, but I'm also trying to like lean in.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah.
So faith is an interesting concept because a lot of people, specifically in Protestant fundamentalist circles, define faith as certainty.
Yep.
Right? Like certainty. And though I believe that there are ways we can be certain about aspects of faith, I don't think faith is the same as certainty.
Right.
I think faith, to me, if we look at like the definition, we pull up the definition, is more of a confidence spectrum. Right? Like I am
For sure.
I am confident in X, Y, and Z. I am confident that my wife loves me
For sure.
and has been faithful to me and is a good wife and a good mother based on my experience with her and the trust and the life that we've built together.
Right.
Am I certain? No, I haven't had a video camera following her around for the 20 years we've been together, right? But I'm fairly confident and I trust her and I'm fairly confident in that and I move in a direction that's fairly close to certainty, but not in a absolute objective fact standpoint. So I think sometimes what Christians have done is they've allowed atheists' definition of evidence,
Yes.
and then in turn try to argue faith in terms
in that
that we
Alex
don't make
O'Connor
sense.
and Jordan Peterson conversation, it's like there's an implicit assumption
Yes.
loaded into what evidence constitutes evidence.
Yes.
Which is already has this materialist presupposition in it.
Absolutely. You nailed it. So this is how I've defined faith, and maybe you've heard me say this before. So for me, I have confidence that if I eat, I don't know, are you into like fitness and health and stuff like that? Like if I eat my ideal body weight, well, I don't know.
No, I'm just
You're pretty
no,
lean.
No, I'm okay. It's a joke.
So if I eat my ideal body weight in grams of protein, and I strength train, and I do compound lifts, and I walk 10,000 steps a day, 200 grams of chicken a day, protein a day, which is about 2 pounds, in 10,000 steps, compound lifting, I am confident that if I do those things a day, 4 or 5 times a week, that I will get the said results.
Yeah.
Right? I don't I wasn't certain of that initially.
Yeah, it's based on evidence.
But enough people told me that, hey, man, if you eat chicken and broccoli and you go and you move and you hit these compound lifts and you do them properly and you do the bench, the squat, the deadlift, the pull-up, you will eventually look great with your shirt off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I had enough of faith, and Jesus talks about the faith of a mustard seed, that I started doing said things. And then before I knew it, I walk in one day, and I think Zach was there, and John Keith was in the studio. And I walk in, I had a tank top on, I think, and I was just running to grab ice or something. And John Keith goes, "Bro, you got abs?" And I was like, Do I?
Yeah.
And it was like the first time it hit me that like, oh, like I'm not fat no more. Like I'm actually shredded and lean for the first time.
Yeah.
And I had like experimented with lifting weights and experimented with going to the gym, but never like in a consistent regiment. Let me work this out. Now, I think faith, it's a flawed metaphor, but I think it's similar. So like when I'm sitting down with my vegetarian buddy who's like, you know, the chicken is going to blah, blah, blah. And it's just, you get off the chicken. And it's like, no. Like I know this works because I've worked it and I've seen the results of the faith. And now I am certain that if I eat the ideal amount of protein and I go do my 10,000 steps a day walking and I hit the right compound lifts, now I am certain that it will work.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think therein lies like that paradoxical view. But initially I wasn't sure, but it was like enough people told me, you know.
I would say I think I'm a little past that.
Okay.
Like, I mean, I think I'm definitely being led by something.
Yeah.
I think that I'm leaning in a variety of different directions.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the first things I did was read a comparative religions book just to set the basis of like what are the core things that people believe. And then you know, and obviously culturally I have way more familiarity with Christianity.
Sure.
So naturally I'm a little more like leaning in that direction. But I will say that there are a lot of things that I have gained as far as like wisdom from my own personal experience and mapping of things in my head, and then I just see that just echoed in Christianity. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I thought that was an original idea, and it wasn't.
It wasn't.
You know what I'm saying? And then you know that's happened several times, and so I don't need verifiable proof to that extent, and I do actually I believe there's an entire realm of just as viable or just as important belief that doesn't contain the logic. You know, what's the logic of love? You know what I'm saying? It's
hard to quantify love.
Yeah, and it's abstract, and it's but it's one. If you felt it, you know how real it is.
Yeah,
you know?
that's good. That's a great point. If you felt it, you know how real it is. And so I guess the part that folks sometimes struggle with is the tension of like grace and truth, right? Like Jesus comes full of grace and truth. And so what that means is grace is a gift that you don't do anything to deserve it. Ephesians 2, right? Like you've been saved by grace through faith. And this is not of your own doing, but is the work of God, so no one can boast. The tricky part is the verse right after that says, for you are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he predestined for you to do ahead of time. So it's this tension of our view of salvation it has nothing to do with how good or moral of a person I am. Yeah. It has to do with Jesus's work on the cross and then 2 Corinthians says that he then gives me his righteousness. Yeah. That I'm not righteous because of me. Right. I'm righteous because of Jesus. Right. And then I get to go and practice my faith. And I think sometimes in Protestant circles, like we not all the time, but we have a lower view of practice. We have a lower view of like sacraments, like communion and baptism, and we have a higher view of like grace and knowledge. Like I just need to know facts. Yeah. When I would say like I'll give you, and this is not like a plug, but I'll give you like one of our prayer journals. Sure. And I encourage people all the time, like just sit down and document your prayers for a month, and just pray for a month. Document and write down everything you're praying for. Write down, because we break it down into like things you're grateful for, like great gratitude, praise requests, praise reports, people you're praying for, like other people, things you're praying for yourself, and then like a memory verse that you're meditating on. Yeah. Right? And so like when you structure that out and you do that for a month, then you start seeing like the tangible hand of God moving in your life, and you go, oh, like I make a practice of something and I become more and more confident of said practice of something.
I have a running document where I just type things in that I think of or that I think about. Yeah. And if I'm like, oh, that's a really interesting point, I'll kind of expound upon it in just this free form.
Yeah. So you're kind of more like journaling.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
so this is more like journaling, but like inviting God into your life and like asking him to move on your behalf, and then saying like, and then seeing the prayers answered. Because sometimes what happens is we'll pray for stuff and then we just forget that we prayed for stuff, you know? So you see all throughout the Old Testament, God is like reminding the children of Israel, like, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I took you out of the Egypt. I've done these things.
Right.
So I think we need to be reminded of the things we were praying for, which can be difficult if like, it can be difficult if you're in a spot where you're like, dude, like, I'm good. Like, my life is solid. Like, I'm happily married. My career's going well. You know, like, I'm stable.
Yeah.
But you invite God in, and all of a sudden you go, whoa, like, this is spooky.
Yeah.
Like, there's some spooky stuff happening in my life.
So again, I don't know where you would land on this, but that invitation is, I feel like I've felt the presence of that, whether or not I have made the full leap.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And
what's keeping you from making the full leap?
Again, I have to look at all the historical stuff.
Okay.
The having an even more kind of robust understanding of this bridge from conscious mentation that precedes space and time to personal God that has, you know what I'm saying? I think there's that. And also, you know, I think I want to also understand what other religions believe about certain things. And so, yeah, I'm trying, I feel pulled in a direction, but I'm trying to make sure that I cover my bases before I fully commit. When I make the faith jump, you know what I'm saying? I want to do it. I don't want to be like, oh, I've stopped the pursuit here, and now this faith jump feels a little less authentic.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you're really saying is, I think Jesus said this in light of salvation, which he says, like, count the cost. Count the cost. Like, before a builder builds a building, he first has to count the cost. And so what you're really saying is, I want to do my due diligence and I want to count the cost of what it means to be a disciple before I flippantly say I'm a Christian.
Sure.
Which is extremely commendable and respectful.
Thank you,
because
bro.
I think a lot of folks would just be like, yeah, man, like, sure, like, Jesus is cool. Jesus is my homeboy. And it's like, hold on. It means so much more than that, you know? So I think that's very commendable. Can I kind of just drop some stuff on you about the resurrection? You tell me what you think?
Sure.
Okay. So here are some things that I'm gonna try to say this from as much of a historical perspective as possible and less of like try to sell you, right? The historical,
also, I'm not worried about the selling either.
Yeah. The historical consensus of Jesus, and this is not just Christian theologians. This is like, I'm pretty sure everything I'm going to tell you is what Bart Ehrman, who is the leading textual critic, who's an agnostic, amazing debates. If you ever want to go down the rabbit hole of textual variants of the New Testament, him and James White go over a 3-hour debate of all the little things that are different. And
you have
where
to send me that.
Dude,
I'd love
it's
to
good.
watch that.
And they're both great debaters. Bart Ehrman also debated, oh gosh, there's... It's a Catholic apologist dude, and it's really good. So here's the kind of like some basic facts. Like, Jesus existed. People believe Jesus existed. Jesus had some sort of ministry. There was he caused some sort of ruckus amongst the Romans and the religious people at the time. That he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. That is more or less proven from archaeology and just historical record outside of the New Testament. That upon his death, the body goes missing because and that's where all the conspiracy starts. They stole the body, they did this, they did that, right? And then there's the early apostles, or the women, all the people were convinced that they saw a bodily risen Jesus. Right? That, like, this is what Bart Ehrman was. This is what agnostics say. Like, Peter was convinced there was a bodily risen Jesus. Now, they would argue it off as like mass hallucination, which has never happened in the history of the world. Like, everyone seeing the same hallucination, right? Like, that's so. And then Paul sees a bodily risen Jesus. Then Jesus' brother James, or cousin James, if you're Catholic, saw a bodily Jesus to the point where it doesn't seem like he was a follower before. And then he goes on to be the bishop of Jerusalem. And so all of these people who just saw their best friend and their Messiah and their rabbi die had no concept of a bodily resurrection. They were expecting a apocalyptic Messiah to rise up and restore them and take them back from Rome. All of a sudden start seeing this bodily risen Jesus. Then the New Testament, the earliest created New Testament is 1 Corinthians 15, where it says that he was around for 40 days in Acts it says he was for 40 days. In 1 Corinthians it says he revealed himself to over 500 people, most of whom are still alive, right? So it's like this creed that goes back to within a couple weeks of Jesus's resurrection. And then this movement that starts in this small, inconsequential town in this small part of the world ends up completely revolutionizing the world, illegal for the first 300 years. And then when Rome becomes converted, then all of a sudden it just keeps spreading and spreading and spreading, right? So those are kind of like some of the basic facts. Now notice I didn't say like, and right. But they were convinced. Like these are things that the secular historians would say, and they were convinced. And many of the apostles, though not all, died horrible deaths. And they would have known that Jesus was not bodily risen. Like they died saying Jesus is Lord, which is a complete, spit in the face to Caesar. And they would have known that they were dying for a lie. People die for a lie. People are deceived all the time, self-deceived. But to know that you're dying for a lie and to know that this is all nonsense, we really hid the body, it didn't really happen, right? I think is kind of like the last.
Well, it's interesting that there was denial before.
What do you mean?
Well, there was the apostles denied.
Peter denied.
So like you would think Thomas. That if you've done that already, there's an example of you denying already when you claim to have believed it. I mean, this has got to be an even stronger belief.
True. So those are like some of the, I guess, historical facts. And again, hopefully the skeptics that watch will acknowledge that I really tried to lay that out for you in an objective way. And so when I look at all that, and by the way, this was the door for me to come through the faith. So I was kind of in a similar place as you, where I was like going to church with a girl. The only way I could see her on Sundays over the summer was to go to church with her and her family. So I'm going to church. I'm having these kind of like encounters. I'm feeling something. I'm being guided. And then me and her break up. I start dating a Jehovah's Witness girl. And I start looking at Islam. I start looking at Mormonism. And I ended up actually reading this book right here, The New Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. As a sophomore in high school. And that's kind of what sealed the deal for me, because it was a comparative study of all world religions and the evidence of the resurrection. And so after looking all that, I go, gosh, it's probably reasonable to conclude that Jesus really is who he says he was, that he really did what he said he did, and that he bodily rose, he defied the laws of nature. And if all of that is true, that has radical implications for how I am to now live my life.
For sure.
That's kind of how I arrived. So what do you make of all that?
Well, I mean, again, I'd love to watch the kind of the back and forth to it. I don't hear anything that like I don't or wouldn't be open to. But I don't really have an opinion on it, because I don't have interjections. I don't be like, oh, well, okay, but how about this or how about that? I'm just on the kind of like not giving it too much thought.
I would
love some resources.
Jimmy Akin debated Bart Ehrman. So I'll send you all these links,
please.
And I think there's also like narrative films about this. Have you ever heard of the Case for Christ?
Yes.
Okay, so Lee Strobel, investigative journalist, wife gets saved. He wants to disprove Christianity. Starts this whole pursuit that I just kind of laid out for you, similar to Josh McDowell's. In the process, radically saved, radically converted, because he went and tried to disprove it. He ends up getting converted.
Can I ask you a question? This is not resurrection related, so pardon me if we're going a different direction. No. How do you explain the phenomenology of mystical experience in other religions? Or in other religions, or say even meditation or psychedelics, or how do you explain those from your perspective?
That's a great question, and it's not going to be a popular answer. So I think the spiritual world is real. I think the spiritual world is in my opinion, the explanation for UFOs, things like UFOs. Another dimension.
Bernardo Kastrup would agree with that. Have you Passport to Magonia?
Oh, never heard of it.
That's a book that I'm starting to read. And it's all around that idea.
And then there was an experiment even done. We did a video on this a couple weeks ago. The CIA did a full-on experiment. What was that thing called, Zach, that we just did a video? I can't remember. No, it was before MK Ultra. It was the other. It was they hired like an Eastern mysticist, I think, and basically like discovered that there was another realm, and he started using this to spy on Russians in the middle of the war to discover what was happening.
That sounds crazy.
Creepy stuff.
That sounds crazy.
And then they discovered that these people that were dabbling in this, that a lot of them were succumbing to what I would just describe as demonic influence, right?
Sure.
So I think, so from a macro level, St. Augustine said that all truth is God's truth, meaning that if we find values that overlap with the Bible, you can see them in all cultures, right? People that have not been Christianized, you could still see those values, right? I would say they're less prevalent, right? Like if you look at like China that had the one-child policy up until 2015, very low view, very anti-Christian view of life, right? But that doesn't mean there's not aspects of Chinese culture that just through common grace and just through all truth being God's truth can be real, or fill in the blank, right? But I do think that when you are opening up yourself to the spiritual realm, which I believe is very real, that a lot of times you could be opening up yourself to the demonic realm, as covered as an angel of light.
Yeah, okay.
And so I would say I would put psychedelics there. I would put like deep meditation stuff there. Like if you're really trying to like go into meditation, the exercises from this operation the CIA did, I feel awful for not remembering what it's called, but I'll send it to you. I would say that stuff is there. And it's also interesting that when you look at folks who've had encounters with UFOs are all folks that have dabbled in New Age spirituality and mysticism. And there's a strong correlation with them and then what goes on to happen with them afterwards. So I think it's very real, but I think it's very dangerous. I think it's very real and very dangerous. And you see it in the Old Testament. Saul summons one of the spirits of the prophets after he's dead, and the spirit's like, no, like, what are you doing? Like, don't do this. So you see it in the Old Testament, and I believe in the New Testament in Acts, where there are people that can access the spiritual realm, but I think it does way more harm than good.
Okay. Have you seen examples? So for like some of the best models of Christianity for me are the people that have just a certain warmth and presence about them. You can kind of sense that and feel that egolessness with them. And but cross-culturally, you have that as well for people that are subscribed to a particular religion that would attribute those things that seem to be reflective of God.
Those kind of like fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sure. And they would attribute that to their religion. So, but you would say that maybe they have not allowed or through those experiences that they haven't gained the darkness, or that's a and that's a really good point. So I would say, one, I ultimately don't know how all that works, right? Two, I would say I think that people can exhibit aspects of godliness through natural law. So St. Thomas Aquinas talks about natural law. There's natural law, there's eternal law. So I think people can exhibit aspects of it. Romans chapter 2 says that the Gentiles had no law, but their conscience was a law unto themselves. So that there is some sort of precedent for folks who have not heard of Jesus, who have not experienced Christianity, to get it right on certain aspects. Now, how that stands in eternity, I don't know how all that works out, right? So I'm not drawing hard lines in that regard, but I would say there seems to be people who are exhibiting similar virtues, values, expressions without having the accurate source. Right. And I don't know what that is. I'm not saying all of that is demonic, because I do believe, and we're seeing this, we just did a video on it yesterday, the number of times people with near-death experiences who've never heard of Jesus, Jesus appears to them. After the incredible success of our Bless God prayer journal, many of you guys began to ask for something that had a planner. And so we combined our Bless God prayer journal with a brand new leadership planner that jam-packs the same things from our prayer journal with a planner, goal setting, leadership meeting, and notes. With the next pages, you can see different sections right along here of this leadership planner, where you can start out with actionable goals, 12 months of calendar, our original prayer journal prompts, our leadership journal with the proven problem solution framework, and of course, just free write notes. This leadership planner is based off of Matthew 25:14-30, which of course is the parable of the talents. The vision of the planner is to help you make the most of your time, talent, and treasure. Head over to blessgod.shop and get yours today. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace. Yeah, that's spooky. Or the number of times full-on Muslim nations are having appearances of Jesus and entire villages are getting converted. Like there's some crazy stuff that happens. So I do believe that Jesus can reveal himself, and maybe not even reveal himself as like, I am Jesus of Nazareth, right? But like reveal himself through dreams, visions, and then over time people practice what seems to be a form of Christianity. I think this is in parts of Africa,
and I feel really ignorant saying parts of Africa, right? Because Africa is a massive continent, where they discover these folks and they follow a risen Messiah, God man, who dies for the atonement of sins without ever having a Bible.
Yeah.
You know? So I think there's something there.
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting. Have you ever, I'm assuming you've never dabbled in psychedelics at all?
I have not.
Yeah.
I'm scared.
I would say.
Have you?
Yeah. Well, so, yeah, mushrooms, but a few times. But my typical view of people who had done psychedelics before, which, you know, haven't gone to Bonnaroo, you know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, it's like this kind of hippie thing that people take, and then they're like, you know, feel one with nature, do whatever they're doing, right? They're seeing things. But then I started to see like credible intellectuals speaking about it in a way that wasn't like fantastical, but they were
It's also been used to treat PTSD.
Yeah. But you know, hearing some of the literature on the psychedelics, specifically if I'm just talking about psilocybin and those effects, but you know, Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson talking about Sam Harris having done it, Lex Friedman, you know, people like that kind of like was like, oh, like this is very interesting, because I was very interested in the mystery of what is going on with that. Even like some of the DMT stuff, not to turn into Joe Rogan, but some of the DMT stuff, the DMT studies is like, you know, these test subjects were coming back and saying that the reality they experienced was more real than reality itself. And, you know, which, I mean, a Christian would probably say that too, if, you know what I'm saying, having experienced that, right?
Yeah.
That's more, but all I'm saying is that what is going on there. So that kind of pushed me to it. I don't, definitely don't deify a mushroom or anything like that, but I do think there are a couple things that I experienced that maybe are worth talking about or exploring. But I think in part it led me to explore all this stuff even more.
Because you saw there's a spiritual realm.
Yeah. So it was the two things that I would say. One is that we don't know what consciousness is at all. Like it is. So we have this default mode network, this standard range of experiences, and then on a mushroom trip, it becomes so foreign. It's ineffable. It's ineffable. I keep saying that incorrectly, but ineffable. But it is like I was feeling feelings that I had never felt. You know how there's a difference between like being anxious or irritated or frustrated? Those are kind of like similar on the word tree. These were stuff that was similar, but something I had never felt before. Like everything was uncanny in a way, which is really strange just from a phenomenology perspective. I'm like, this is really, I don't have words to describe these things. And then there was also another portion of this that, you know, it's really uncomfortable, or at least for me, it was really uncomfortable for like the first hour. And then there's a moment where it just kind of clicks into this like peaceful area. But for some reason, was
there someone like monitoring you while you were doing this?
Yeah, I was with my wife, but it was just me. I was just like, again, I'm just interested to.
Was she on it too?
No,
or no, she
no.
was okay. So she's kind of there to make sure. Well,
what's actually really crazy is that mentally I was fully there. It wasn't like I think you have this idea of like alcohol or weed, how that affects you. It's like a layer on your current experience or whatever. This was like I'm fully in my head. Experiencing these things, but I just can't explain it. It's just like if, you know, a baby being born. It's like all of a sudden it's touching air and like there's sounds and you can hear hertz over, you know what I mean, frequencies over a certain level. It's just unexplainable. But there was also, for some reason, this correlated to wisdom. And so in this experience that I had, I was basically just laying there. My mind was calm, which my thoughts are always racing. But I had like a person in my life would come, like it was like it floated in thought-wise. And then I would think about my relationship to them and, you know, oh yeah, well, you know, I was frustrated by this thing, but then you start applying grace and and it was like I was like spinning my relationship with them around and was, you know, ruminating on it. And then once I feel like I had given maximum grace to this person, it would leave and then the next person would come in. And for like 2.5, 3 hours, I was just going through that process. But
was this like a concentrated dose? Like, did you know how much you were taking?
Yeah, this was 2.5 grams.
Okay, so this wasn't like something someone just kind of handed you in a random bag.
No. Again, I was, you know, quite frankly, I was scared. You know what I'm saying, before doing this, but I was just so fascinated that I'm like, I have to see what this is.
And what would you say is like the heart behind you
don't know. I was just fascinated by consciousness, and like there's a lot of like actual like thought experiments that kind of fed this as well.
Okay.
Which I can talk about here in a second. But my two takeaways from this mushroom experience is that there's an entire realm of conscious experience that we don't have access to, and there's scientific cases made for that. Donald Hoffman's book, The Case Against Reality, kind of lays that out. We can get into that too if you want. And then then for some reason there is a correlation with wisdom. You know when you hear good advice and it's just it's good advice, it clicks with you, and it for some reason both of these states, like these are properties that seem to happen.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know why that is. I don't. It's really strange.
So this is where it can get kind of murky, where you can get into like I believe it's Tertullian that said like Jesus is the wisdom of God, right? So when you're looking at Proverbs, which I think would actually be great if you've never done it. Like I read a chapter of Proverbs a day. Sure. So like today is, what is today? The 5th. So I read Proverbs chapter 5. And it just kind of gives me an easy framework. And then I'll usually go read something else in the New Testament. But you get into the book of Proverbs and it's like the wisdom of God as if it's a person. And then it's aspects of it even talking about the Son of God, which is like, this is the Old Testament, it's referencing the Son of God. It's really interesting. But it kind of gets into this idea that Jordan Peterson will say like the Logos, right? And he's kind of pulling it from the Greeks, but then like when I heard him speak Sunday in South Carolina, like he was like, no, the Logos is Jesus. The Logos is that which hovers over the earth in Genesis. Like, and so I've never heard him so cleanly connect like the Logos to Jesus. So when you say wisdom, I think the wisdom of God is, again, it's still the wisdom of God, even regardless of the source. I just get spooked out in terms of like, what am I opening up my spirit to? For sure. In terms of doing like a psychedelic like that. And so, I mean, the furthest I've went is when I had knee surgery, and was John Keith with me when this happened? I don't remember. No, he was not. I took cannabis for edibles for pain relief. Yeah. Because I was afraid to take the Oxycontin or Norco or whatever they're giving me. And I had a really bad trip on a red eye. For sure. And it just spooked me out. I thought I was going to die. And so I've just been like,
also edibles are really strong.
They're really strong. And I was taking it like 5 grams. And then I'm like, oh, well, let me try to get sleep on this red eye to Boston. And I ended up mixing sativa and indica. And then it was like 20 grams. Usually I take like 2.5 or 5. And bro, it was...
It
messed me up,
yeah,
bro.
no, I think all of those are valid. I'm also definitely not advocating just ad hoc.
When was the last time you did it? Huh? When was the last time you did the
probably 8 or 9 months ago, maybe.
Okay.
I had two different experiences and 2 different trips, but I think again, I'm not drawing like crazy conclusions from it.
But you're just using it as a point to say, based on those experiences, you've came to the conclusion that there's something beyond.
Well, I also gained humility.
Okay.
Like I think you have, I think there's so much. I mean, if you're secular, you don't have a lot of humility about that. You feel like science is, we're just inches away from grasping reality as it is in and of itself, and like, do 3 grams of mushrooms and just blow that idea away.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
So I actually have. I mean, there's a whole start. This would be a long conversation, but there's a whole start to a framework of this. So if I talk about Donald Hoffman's points that he puts forth in The Case Against Reality, he's a panpsychist, which basically he essentially believes that consciousness is another feature of matter. So materialism would say that at the base level of reality, everything can be described in terms of quantities. Sure. So there's no qualitative part. And then, of course, then you have the hard problem of consciousness, which is how do you
quantify consciousness? Yeah.
Yeah. But how does qualitativeless matter just somehow, you know what I'm saying, produce what it means to see the color blue?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that anyway, but panpsychism is sort of like in between there. Okay. Which is that okay, maybe there's another actual, mass charge, velocity, whatever, and then consciousness. So there's conscious agents. But the first thing he puts forth, I'll just give the big ideas here. Fitness beats truth theorem, the FBT theorem. And essentially he just says that we did not evolve to perceive truth. We evolved for fitness. And our brain does a great job of limiting what we experience, what we see, and part of that is like caloric intake, you know what I'm saying? You have to, it takes energy to make sense of the world, and so it needs to be windowed off to be maximally optimized. And so if you evolve over time for fitness, you're deviating a lot from what the object is in and of itself.
Okay.
And
I like that. I like we said we've evolved to pursue fitness and not truth. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
okay.
I mean, and there's so many examples of this, but one that I really like. This just kind of blew my mind when I thought about this before I even read the book. I thought about this, and when I saw it in there, I was like, I'm hooked on exploring this more.
Yeah.
But we only see a small sliver of the light spectrum.
Okay.
But everything we can account for from our vision is to the light that we can see. Every texture, every bit of depth, every color. And this is what we perceive as being real.
Yep.
But our biology limits what we're able to see. And we're talking like, there's estimates, 2%, whatever. But so even just on that basis, empirically, we have a 2% sliver view of reality. You know what I'm saying?
That's interesting.
So it's like it's really weird to think about, because like how would my perception of the world look if I could see how radio waves are interacting with matter? You would look completely different. I have no idea how to even wrap my head around that. So these are just some of the things that started dipping my toe. I'm like, what is going on here? The second thing he says, the second main point that he puts forth is the interface theorem of perception, which is very loaded, but essentially that if you look at, he uses a metaphor of icons on a desktop. So if you're looking at your mail app, it's this blue icon and it has an envelope and you click it. And so you're describing the properties of this, but in reality, what's actually happening is there's coding under that, and below the coding is binary. At the fundamental level, it's electrical signals being on or off. But that's not useful to us. We can't utilize that. And so we have, again, this is the fitness part. We are operating with matter as an interface. So, and then Bernardo Kastrup echoes the same idea. I think this is my favorite metaphor, which is that if you're flying a plane, you're in the cockpit of a plane, reality itself is outside the plane. But let's say it gets really cloudy, right? And a pilot can no longer see, but he has dials, a dashboard of dials in front of him, and he can fly the plane and land it safely based on the dials. The dials are a description of reality in and of itself, but the dials themselves are not reality. In fact, they do not resemble reality whatsoever. And so I think basically Bernardo's position is that the domain of science is the description of dials, but science is saying the dials are reality. We can pull the territory out of the map.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I think the beautiful part, like when you say all that, to me, dials are the reflections of the reality. They're not, nothing's in and of themselves, right? So what I instantly think about, my brain goes to like the incarnation of Jesus, the Logos, coming in the form of human flesh, right? And so now you have the invisible God.
God has become a dial.
Yeah, God becomes man.
Yeah.
Right? And so now God is amongst us and present in our material world. And it does a lot to deflect Gnosticism, right? The idea that like it's just about knowledge and information and consciousness, and you can't quantify consciousness, therefore it's that. But no. That Jesus is in both. Like Jesus is the God man. He's fully man, fully God.
Yeah.
On earth. And then when he dies and resurrects, he leaves in a physical body. And then he makes the same promise to us that there will be a resurrection of the living and the dead, and we will get new physical bodies. So it's this beautiful like harmony that comes together, that heaven comes to earth, empowers and overcomes us, succumbs us, that drawing that you're feeling, right?
Yeah.
That unctioning that you're feeling. I would describe it as the Holy Spirit drawing himself to you, revealing himself to you. And it's not just, oh, we get saved, now we got hell insurance, so we just check out from the world. No. We get saved, we're saved, we're being saved, and we will be saved, but we also become the image bearers of God on this side of eternity. We also become the hands and feet of Jesus here and now.
Yeah.
We also usher in the kingdom here and now and do good to the least of these here and now because we've had this radical encounter, right?
Yeah.
And we do it with no strings attached. We don't do it because we need the credit, the glory, the people to be on our team, right? If you look at the majority of the philanthropy done in the world, you look at the majority of the charity done, you look at the rates of adoption, the majority of that is all done by Christians. you know? And not to say that other people can't do good things, but I think there's something different when people grasp the incarnation and the implications of the incarnation, that we are the hands and feet of Jesus here and now, and that we have power here and now, and that through that power we can usher in beauty and goodness and art and like the logos, like the logos Jesus becomes here through us, right? The Spirit of God indwells that the believer. And so I think when you're describing these things, I go, yeah, man, like, and here's the quantifiable kind of, I don't want to say answer to that, but the response to that is in the gospel.
Well, to be fair, this basis is what, like, this is dealing with something a bit different. This is a metaphysical conversation. We don't get a ton. We get very in the Bible. You don't get like deep metaphysical descriptions. Pulling in science. You're getting kind of metaphors and potentially real things. You know what I'm saying, in Genesis or whatever.
Yes.
So these things within our current understanding of the way the world works with science, it's kind of exploring this picture that, but to me, kind of push me even further in the direction of considering, you know what I'm saying, an existing God.
Yeah.
And so I think that I also agree with you. I'm saying that these ideas kind of push that forward. I also don't think science, I'm sure you probably would agree with this just based on our conversations, I don't think science and Christianity are at odds.
Yeah, not at all.
You know, except for the implicit assumption that materialism is the base level of nature.
Yes, because when science starts trying to give answers instead of ask questions, then you go, no, you're not qualified to answer the questions you're trying to ask.
So that is to me the non-starter of science saying the dashboard dials are reality.
The thing. Yeah, that's good.
And then, you know, if we get a little bit deeper into Bernardo, he has a couple other things. So what he would say is that that human beings have a dissociative boundary, more or less like an ego.
Okay.
This prevents us from having and this might get a little Eastern.
Okay.
But he has some I think Eastern philosophy maybe just like it has a lot of the same themes. I think it just falls short of, you know, Jesus as a person or whatever. But
well, I mean, Eastern, like Christianity was initially an Eastern religion,
right?
You know, so it's like if you're going full on like Hindu, Buddhism, yes, that's different. But like foundationally, it was the when it became to the West and it fused with Enlightenment, which I would argue that the Protestant Reformation kind of gave way to secularism and Enlightenism and all these sorts of things, and that's very Western, you know, like the need to like nail down God into a systematic theology. That's not how like Armenian Christians, Indian Christians, or Ethiopian Christians think about it. So anyway, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. I think that's good to know. So what he would say is that basically idealism is that conscious meditation precedes matter, which to me that's basically God. That's
yeah. Your consciousness predates the physical form. Am I tracking correctly?
Yeah. It's a more base fundamental layer, you know. And if you have if you do believe in a God that's outside of space and time, you have to believe that because you know. But so he gives some examples of what this looks like. And so he gives two examples. I'll give you the first one, which is dissociative identity disorder. So we have a dissociative boundary. I don't know what you're thinking. I don't have access to that. I don't have access to conscious mentation at large, right? In people with, you know, multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder, they have alters, which are the different people, but they're all being contained within the same consciousness, but they're completely divorced from each other in terms of experience and relation. And that phenomenon is so strong that there's been cases where one alter would actually be blind, and when they're under a brain scan, you can see that the visual cortex is offline, just from this mentation switch. But these people don't relate to the first person of each other, but it's still taking place within one mind. So he's giving an example scientifically of a phenomenon that seems to be present there. This one really spoke to me though, which is thinking about it in terms of dreams.
Okay.
So when you go to sleep, you're experiencing the dream as your first person alter, your first person avatar. You're navigating through a physical space. You know, you're interacting with people. You don't know where it's going. It's unfolding before your eyes. it relates to you as a person, right? You're experiencing this. However, all the buildings and all the people that you interact with are you as well. That's all your consciousness. You just don't have that perspective of them because they're all taking place within your sleeping mind. And so you have this detachment from this higher level consciousness. And so to me, that one's really easy to grasp because I don't have dissociative identity disorder, but I dream, and that is weird. What is that? Like, that's all taking place, but it's unfolding as if this is an actual environment that isn't my mind.
Yeah, I'm one of my favorite movies is Inception. So when you
there
jump
you go.
into
Yeah,
Inception,
me too.
it's very
Me too.
trippy and wild, and then you go into dreams. I do believe that Acts 2:18 says, like, in the last days, young men will see visions, old men will dream dreams, daughters will prophesy, right? So we just finished the book of Genesis with my son, and you get into the story of Joseph and him being able to interpret dreams, you know? And so I do think that God does speak to people through dreams. So it's not, sometimes it is just your own consciousness and your own world that you've created, and it's almost like you're playing a movie, like you're in the middle of a movie. But I believe oftentimes God can come down and speak to you through your dreams.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair.
So I think it's and both. But I think, generally speaking, it's what you're describing.
But even with that's not going to violate where this kind of is going. I think that even fits in within this. So we have a dissociative boundary that prevents us from experiencing consciousness at large.
Okay.
And to me, I think of the boundary as ego.
Okay.
So in ego, not in terms of arrogance or whatever, but in terms of like the egocentrism, me being an individual person and that is experiencing the world, like, and
first, what is it called? First person syndrome.
Sure.
First
person syndrome.
Yeah.
So when I asked you about the phenomenology of these different experiences, this is a model that encapsulates all of those. Which is, and first off, we can speak to just specifically Christianity, and maybe you can dig into that in a moment. But I think that if you were to describe Jesus as, a fitting description for Jesus would be a person who is truly egoless, and that's proven through the sacrifices he was willing to make and take the burdens of everyone's sin on. But also it explains near-death experience. There's some part of the brain that is the image of what the dissociative boundary looks like, and when your brain is damaged or whatever, or you have a near-death experience, there's less activity in that portion. So it essentially, you could think of it making the dissociative boundary more porous, and you're having access to other conscious mentation come into play there. Mushrooms, same sort of thing. And just quick aside for the mushroom part, people have bad trips. It's really overwhelming because it's so unexplainable. But then I think of like the verses in the Bible where it talks about not being able to look upon God's face because you would die. It's too overwhelming. Like that seems like if you're fully secular, that seems like that doesn't resonate with you at all. But like if you've had a mushroom trip, you're kind of like, like, within that framework is like, that seems, I mean, yes, and so, so there's that entire idea. And I think that things that feed ego dissolution kind of open you up to that. So that's how I explain the phenomenology of these different religions, because if the base of it is sacrifice of self or dissolving that ego, you get the benefits of that. Now, I'm not saying that I still need to figure out which story has it correct or which model there, but from a metaphysical model, that's more or less where I'm at, which is that introspection provides that. I think there's some digging you can do on yourself to how am I being in relation to these people and dissolving the ego. I think forgiveness does that. That's a big part for me is like you have to experience all this discomfort of ruminating on this person and trying to like you go through this process of ego dissolution and you get that. So anyway, what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, no, I think obviously the forgiveness aspect, like we're instructed to forgive people, we're instructed to forgive our enemies, we're instructed to love our enemies. Like these are all counterintuitive things to the human experience and absolutely counterintuitive to the ego. I think it's an interesting explanation. I think the part that I believe is unique, I don't know if it's unique, but it's different, is that Romans 1 talks about how the human heart, I think Martin Luther said, like, the human heart is an idol factory, right? Meaning that if you just consume, like the default position is going to be like we will make little gods of something.
Yeah,
right?
you don't get to not worship.
Yeah,
something's at the helm of where your orienting principle.
Yeah, and so I think my concern would be like if we don't make a clear enough distinction between creator and creation, then we will elevate creation to the place of creator. And then you get into Eckhart's Tolle. There's only one consciousness, and you are that consciousness, and you are Christ, and Christ is you, and you are God.
Yes.
And that's where I go, hold up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
so I to speak to that, I would say that this model is not it doesn't go nearly as far as Christianity goes.
Okay.
Like this model does not provide whether or not there are moral absolutes.
Okay.
That's not the domain of conversation around this. To me, this is like a piece that explains the phenomenology of these things.
Okay.
As far as I haven't dug super deep into Eckhart Tolle, but as far as you being God, I don't. If we're a dissociative boundary, we're clearly a very, very limited case. But you would agree that we're made in the image of God. That's sort of how how I interpret it. We're not the totality.
Yes.
You could never be the only way you can be the totality of it is dying and becoming part of the kingdom of heaven. That's where you get to experience the totality of it, right?
That's called glorification,
Yeah,
you become glorified. The Eastern Orthodox will call it deification. Protestants will call it glorification. You're nailing a lot of these like fundamental aspects of the metaphysical from a Christian lens. That's what's really interesting to hear you talk about.
Why I like this so much is because I don't think that there's a lot of conversations around any of these things in Christianity
in Protestant circles.
Okay, fair enough.
I just had a 3-hour conversation with my Eastern Orthodox friends about
fair enough.
this.
I haven't been and I'm not saying that the conversations aren't had around that, but from this specific sort of model, I'm like, oh, this actually makes things way more tangible and make a lot more sense to me in terms of what this religious language is attempting to get at. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, those are things that have just pushed me in that direction.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of. So I said something to my buddy Neil, who's an Eastern Orthodox dude from Dirt Poor Robbins, Jonathan Peugeot, Eastern Orthodox cat, Tammy Peterson, Jordan Peterson's wife, who's Catholic. And I said, to me, I think Jordan Peterson is to intellectuals what Chronicles of Narnia is to children, right? So C.S. Lewis writes Chronicles of Narnia. It's just one big motif to point people to Jesus, right? And so when I hear what you're saying, it's a lot of what I hear Jordan Peterson, like similar thought processes, not on the metaphysical. And so I think it's very similar, but much like him, when you really pin him down and you take him down to the root of it, he goes, and Jesus is the Logos.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
well, but I also feel like the reason Jordan Peterson has such success and has become such a figure is because he is giving an entry into Christianity that doesn't come with the cultural idea of what Christianity is that they're telling you. That he's coming from, he's using psychology and philosophy to attack these issues. That opens you up to the possibility. If you are just straight up a materialist.
If I'm trying to give you the dogmas up front without the philosophy and the roadmap to get there, the narrative to get there.
Yeah, you're not even open to it. It's okay, and so maybe this translates, maybe this can be a cool segue into just how I view my place in this music landscape.
Okay.
So if you take this, the marketing funnel concept, you just map it onto depth of relationship with God. At the bottom funnel, you have worship music. I mean, this is worship music is for the person that has already subscribed to all of the things, right?
Yes. Do you like worship music?
It feels uplifting.
Yeah.
I'm not fully there, so some of the religious language feels a little funny to me. You know, but it's literally just, I think, just on the basis of me being in this transitional space.
Sure.
However, so on one hand you have worship music at the top of funnel, like, or outside of the funnel, all the way outside of the funnel. No, but you have secular, whatever idol you can put in that place. That's that domain.
Secular love pop songs.
Sure. Yep. And then you have, somebody like No Big Deal makes music that has theological depth and speaks to the human experience, but still evokes explicitly Christian motifs in order to, so that would be a space in here. I don't think there's a lot of artists in this space right above that. I don't think there's a space where people are talking about, something doesn't feel right. I'm seeking something. I need to know, like, I'm asking these questions, like, how do I deal with the fact that my dad just passed away with cancer, from cancer? Like, how do I deal with with this. I have a song called Level Up, and the entire purpose of that song is the alt title is Survivor's Guilt, and the entire first verse I'm talking about all these different people in my family. They're dealing with really difficult things. My dad with cancer, my cousin dying by hitting a tree, his dad killing himself on Easter, my stepdad leaving my mom after a decade of marriage up and out of nowhere. And then the last line of that is, and I just bought a brand new Tesla. And so I'm feeling this survivor's guilt for having success when I'm seeing all these things. The second verse, I question, I'm questioning whether or not my success actually made me a bad person. Are some of these feelings justified? And the arc of that middle section is, no, I actually gained more success as I've become a better person. So that's not the issue. And so then why? And then I proceed to talk about friends and how I have all these friends that have all these things going on. And then, you know,
all your friends love Jesus, by the way, which is very fascinating.
Well, I'm not talking about those friends, but I'm talking about friends.
I'm talking about our mutual friends.
Yes. That's true. That's true. So anyway, I get to this thing where it's like, I'm questioning, like, why do I feel this? And I think even that conviction in and of itself is probably I wouldn't have that conviction if I didn't care about others, you know, because I'm lit, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But that was a questioning record, and I heard Jordan Peterson say something that really stuck with me, which is that the price of privilege is service to others.
That's right.
And so that was kind of the answer to that. I think I'm actually going to make a record that's more or less a response to that question. But I think there's an entire domain of like, hold up, things don't feel right. We all kind of sense it. We all kind of feel it culturally. But there's a lot of people that are not like, they're looking at Christianity as like, it comes with all these things. Like, I have to believe you, and you could take the most cynical or the most fantastical description of, you know, the account there and everything that goes on there and be like, I don't know how I could ever bridge the gap to believing that a virgin birthed, you know, you know what I'm saying? You could take that perspective. I don't feel like there's a lot of people creating music in this space of discovery. So, and that's kind of where I see myself, is like where I can really be of values, because I'm also in this space of searching and discovering. And if I can take some people along that journey with me, like all of that is a direction that is better than the alternative. And I feel like it has to be robust artistically. I feel like if it does not capture people sonically, if it does not move people musically, then it is not effective. And I think you know, that's what makes great art, is the ability for it to do that. And so that's why I put so much stock in the artistic expression portion of it, is because like I now feel like I have a mission that is beyond me. You know what I'm saying? Before I was making music, like, I want to be successful, or I want people to see me as being cool, or view me as a great rapper, or, you know, whatever the case is, me. You know, and now this feels like, this is beyond. So
no, that's good. So in that, you're almost making music as you're on this journey of self-discovery. You're flirting with Christianity. You're going to church. You go to church every Sunday, or
I do,
every Sunday. So you go to church every Sunday.
I listen to Tim Keller.
You listen to Tim Keller.
Shout out Tim Keller.
So
R.I.P. the boy.
Yeah, R.I.P. Tim Keller. So it's very interesting. So let me ask you this. Is there any part of you that maybe wants to keep the cards close to the chest, or not go all the way with a profession?
The Jordan Peterson way?
Yeah, which, by the way, after my last conversation with Jordan Peterson, and hearing him speak the last couple times, I think he's there.
Yeah.
I think he's there, but I think in the same way, I think Jesus says, be wise as serpents, innocent as doves, right?
Yeah.
So I think he's being shrewd in the sense that he doesn't want to alienate his agnostic, atheist, Muslim, Jewish audience.
That was my take. People have asked him that, and I've heard other people's takes on it, and I truthfully, I felt like he doesn't want to speak in such religious language that now all of a sudden it's, you're a preacher and you're stuck in this category, and therefore no one else in this discovery space can view it.
Is there any aspect of you that's maybe like, I'm not sure, because now you see yourself as a part of this funnel that's keeping you from fully surrendering and submitting to Jesus?
100%. And you know, from a Christian lens, let's just take it from a Christian lens, if I guess God will call me in a direction or the other, I would say that I think if I can bridge the language gap a little bit, that's why the profanity to me is almost a feature, not a bug. To those ends, it's like, cool, like, you're used to hearing something like this, and I'm not putting it in there for that purpose, but but I only utilize profanity if I feel like it is a word that is necessary to be there, or But
Yeah.
I would say that perhaps as I get deeper, I actually just move further down the funnel, and but maybe it's like, like John Billion, a great example. If his music is explicitly Christian.
You think so?
I think so. If you really listen to what he's saying, it's explicitly Christian.
Interesting.
Themes. But it is. Oh, so maybe it's not explicit. Maybe the explicit's the wrong word.
Well, no, it's good. It's
very Christian.
It's helpful hearing it from your perspective.
Yeah,
that's why I mean
it's very Christian, but it is put forth in a way that could just be a song. But I think that's going to be more powerful for people in that space.
I got you. Yeah. So I think, one, interesting to hear you refer to John Bellion that way. Two, I don't think that if someone is unapologetic about their faith that they can't still be a on-ramp towards discovery, because I think that those lines have evaporated as much.
Yeah.
This is what I mean.
The project's called Ultramarathon, that the pursuit of the highest good is an ultramarathon. It doesn't end.
That's fire.
Yeah. So I agree with that.
I think now more than ever, the lines of niche and audience have completely evaporated. This is what I mean. I'll give you a really good example. Like, I did a video on that CIA study about discovering the spiritual realm. There was a ton of non-Christians that watched that video. Like, I intentionally package videos around stuff. So I don't know which percentage of my church goes to church. I mean, what percentage of my audience goes to church every Sunday, reads their Bible all the time, right? But there are definitely folks beyond just this niche.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Jordan Peterson coming out and just being like, guys, I'm getting baptized. Like, I don't think that's going to alienate a whole fragment. I think if the content intentionally became on the nose and started proselytizing to people,
right,
that might turn
But
it
I
off.
think that it being on the nose is actually something that he gets a lot of flack for from Christians.
That he's not on the nose enough?
That he's not on the nose enough. Just say Jesus. Stop speaking in terms of the psychology of it or the spiritual part of the logos.
And again, maybe because I've actually been really tuned in the last 2 weeks,
yeah,
it almost seems as if like he just wants everybody to believe in God.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the language I'm getting. But let me just share this with you about profanity. I think profanity can be an interesting utility in certain aspects, and I used to feel this way. And then I had a kid, and then you start seeing, like, you see the cycle
might happen
continue.
with me. Yeah, that
and
might
then
happen
you
with
go,
me, yeah.
you go like I'll give you a real. So my wife is black, my son is black, half black, whatever you want to call it, and I would have friends come around, black friends come around that would use the N-word, and I remember like being confronted with like the way they casually refer to themselves as that. I would not feel comfortable with them accidentally dropping that word around or in reference to my child. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute. I talk differently in different contexts. I'm talking differently when I'm with the boys than I'm with my family. And I talk differently when I'm in certain right? And then the more I like started seeing this little guy enamored with his father, the less I felt comfortable having these compartmentalized aspects of my identity. And the more I said, I just want to be the same. Like, I want to be the same. I want to be the same with you. I want to be the same with Zach and Chris and my nephew Samaje that works with us. I want to be the same with my family. I want to use the same language.
I agree with that.
And obviously, like, if I'm with a bunch of dudes and we're talking about sex, that's going to be a different conversation than how I'm describing sex to my 9-year-old, right?
For sure.
But generally speaking, I want to be the same. And that's at the root of the idea of integrity. Like, integrity is the root word is integer, right? I want to be one. I want to be the same. And so that totally like shifted my view away from profanity as not being not permissible at times. I think there's a time and a place where it could be permissible and in certain context, which is very controversial for me to say as a Christian YouTuber, right? Well, I don't use it because I think it's just not wholesome and hopeful to my family. And I actually think the standard where people get caught up in language, I think God's standard for language is way higher than just don't say these 5 4-letter words. I think it's way higher when Jesus says, like, you will give an account.
Truth is the
well, not just speak truth, but like you will give an account for every idle word that comes out of your mouth. That's what Jesus said.
Yeah, okay.
Paul says, let nothing unwholesome come out of your mouth. There's a lot of unwholesome things Christians say and do in the name of Jesus or in the name of Christianity, or often literally cursing their children or their family members, right? And none of that. So I think the standard of it's like the standard with sexuality. Like we're like, oh man, like don't have sex until you're married. Like, and then Jesus goes, oh yeah, and like don't look at a woman lustfully. And that standard should cause all of us to fear and tremble.
For sure.
Right. And that's not to like dismiss men as being like these hedonistic perverts. Like I'm not saying that's okay. But what I'm saying is any man that looks at their heart and examines their heart goes, man, if I'm not very intentional and on it, I will lust after women. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be porn. Like I will do that.
Yeah.
So then it goes, well, the standard of God is so much higher, which then to me goes, so then the grace of God is that much bigger.
Okay.
You know, like the grace of God will take my idle words. It'll deal with my heart that sometimes is wicked, and it'll still use the messes of my life and transform them into messages that I'm not really worthy.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, God allows me to be a part of this kingdom that He's trying to usher in.
I'm fully on board with everything you said. I think the kids, when I have a kid, I'll be presented with those things. I'm sure I will curse less just casually.
Well, you know, and the experience of seeing your son born. That talk about a metaphysical,
dude, I
spiritual,
can't
miraculous,
wait, bro.
It's out of this world.
Like how you just dropped that.
It's like lyrical, miracle, metaphysical.
No. We didn't even acknowledge it.
Yeah, it's gnarly, bro. It's really miraculous, and I've never like that's an experience that makes you go, God is real. Like God is real, and I have to add good and beauty to the world because I'm not just gonna let the world go to hell in a handbasket. Yeah. Like I have to usher in goodness and beauty.
I feel that internally. Like I feel that. And I think profanity just for me hasn't fully of course I think that it probably I lean on your side, which is like, probably don't need to use it.
And I'm not even being hung up on like, oh, Nate cusses, he's a bad guy. That's not what I'm saying.
Me neither either. As far as like profanity is a very like to me it's like a low resolution. Yeah. Like if I say a profane word in a song to me but then I go home and like I'm supporting my wife and I'm being a great father and a you know, those there's different orders of
just scales. Yeah. Let me say this to you.
Sure.
So I want to come back to the Live Nation aspect of it, and I'm not trying to pitch you on this, but I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay.
But before that, I want to challenge you. I want you, if you would, I would love for you, if you haven't already, to pray that God will reveal Himself to you.
I have.
You have.
Yeah.
And so that's been a process and less of a moment.
It has. Okay. Yeah. It has. I've had some. Now I will say I've had some interesting anecdotes that I'm like, that was weird.
Okay. So the next thing I was going to say is try writing out your prayers. Okay. And document them and like pray for some specific things and pray that God will reveal yourself in a specific way. And are you reading any scripture?
Right now, no, I haven't actually dug into scripture yet. I'm but I'm listening to a lot of.
So you listen more sermons?
Listen to a lot of sermons, but I mean, again, I'm still also dabbling with everything else. But I do feel, again, I wouldn't like. I feel particularly drawn in a direction. Yeah. So
I would encourage you like pray, ask God to reveal Himself to you. Look at the apologetics literature if you want to. You could take that book home with you if you want. That's a freaking encyclopedia, bro.
Okay.
It's the 1999 edition that I had to like really dig to get. Go to the scriptures, go to the apologetics, examine it, and I think you're really, really, really close if you're not already there. Like I think Jordan Peterson's already there. I think he's already there. He's just holding his cards close and he's being careful.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that's going to change. Like I have a feeling at some point that's going to change. And I think you're really close. But here's a thought, and forgive me, I don't mean to connect it in this way because this is people are going to be like, Ruslan, this is a superficial, shallow way to connect this, right? So I mentioned Live Nation earlier. Yeah. And you heard the John Billion interview of how oppressive Live Nation is, how much of a monopoly. It's now officially recognized as a monopoly. I think it was sued by the Justice Department or someone, somebody, right? And so like we would agree that like Live Nation is bad.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Like
it depends on it. I would say
a net negative to artists and fans.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So artists are signing these deals with advances, and they're often just the same as a typical record deal. Fans get charged up all these crazy fees. There's all these weird bots that are ranking up the pricing tickets.
Fully vertically integrated, owning venues.
Yes. Ticketmaster, Live Nation being one. They're trying to separate them. So I've seen Christian bands go and tour the Live Nation circuit. And there's a sneaky term that's always used in media and entertainment, and I'm sure you've heard it. Industry standard. I think it's one of the most dangerous terms used.
I don't like that. I don't like that term.
Industry standard. And so I think as a way to mitigate this, my opinion is I think what could happen, and I actually think this will start to happen eventually, is I think specifically artists who are Christian or Christian artists will see how crazy this entire Live Nation thing is. And then also realize that this magnificent infrastructure of Christian venues all over the country, some of which are like actual churches, some of which are venues owned by churches that churches rent out, that can cut out the middleman and go directly to the consumer, keeping the prices lower for the people, letting the lion's share of the revenue be absorbed by the artist and the team, and keeping that revenue in the kingdom of the broader ecosystem, right? And so I'm not just talking like mega church venues. I'm talking like I was in New York and I was in Williamsburg, and I did this incredible thing at this like old opera house that got converted into like a venue that's owned by a Catholic church. And they're just like, yo, whenever you want to come back, like you can use it, you know?
Yeah.
And we just had a concert here this night, right? So what I'm saying is like, I think there's going to be this like alternative to touring that'll completely revolutionize at least those people in the Christian world that want to utilize and be a part of that world.
I think that'd be sick.
You know what I mean? And so I was kind of curious to see what you think about it, but I don't want to frame it in a way of like, hey, Nate, you know, when you become a Christian artist and you start wanting to tour, there's this entire other world that I think is going to have to rise up so that no one's getting exploited.
Yeah. I think...
it's a crazy way to bring the conversation.
No, you're fine. I think all of that is good. I think the market competition is really good.
Yeah.
I will say, obviously, if a venue has a particular ideology behind it, then it's going to be exclusionary to a lot of people that would otherwise bring a lot of eyeballs to it. So it would still be a Christian pocket of culture. So I think that, but for every Christian artist, I think that's awesome. I think that you should want to do that if you have the alternative present. I think with Live Nations is like, I don't have this issue in Nashville because there's a million venues. But when you're talking about like Louisville or you're talking about Chattanooga or something like that, it's like when the one premier venue that can put on a really good show is owned by Live Nation, you don't really have a choice. I mean, you can go play some crappy stage, but then you can't give the the presentation or the performance maybe that an artist of said caliber deserves. But I mean, I like that idea. I think that if I was a Christian businessman that was interested in getting into the performance space, I would see this as a huge opportunity, especially on the back of that conversation with George Janko to point to. You know what I'm saying? Hey, we got an alternative to this ecosystem. We're going to do it this way, and I'm opening up this venue here, and I'm going to get together with a group of other investors, and we're going to start opening up some places where we can do that.
Yeah, I didn't even mean like so formally. I just meant like piecing together events at alternative venues to stick it to Live Nation, because I think like that is like I've never seen such an exploitive monopoly. In terms of everyone gets the short end of the stick, dude. Like I remember there was a worship band that was opening up, and because of whatever little algorithm they have, their tickets shot up to like $500. For like a worship concert. And to me, that's just not a good look. Like that's just a bad look.
No, I get that.
You know, like regardless on the resale scalper, like because you get like resale within Ticketmaster. It's such a weird system. And so anyway, I'm hopeful that, and again, and as I see these lines kind of not blurring, but like the lines being erased, and you have a George Janko and a John Billion and a Jordan Peterson, which I think are actually theologically more aligned. Now, then we'll get into the issue of like profanity and what it is inappropriate. If Jordan Peterson drops a cuss word or George Janko is that going to be an issue? But I'm watching. Are you familiar with like Jackie and Preston Perry? Jackie Hill Perry?
Yes, I don't.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So they're like doing their own tour, completely put together. Some of them are venues, some of them are churches, and their live podcast tour. I mean, they did 1,500 in LA 2 nights in a row.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You know, which is like for a podcast. So I'm just seeing these things shifting in real time. And as I'm seeing a lot of these thinkers come out, like a Jordan Peterson and these folks that are coming out, is like, someone like, I think you represent an avatar for where a lot of people are at. That's why I was really excited to have this conversation with you, because I'm like, I think Nate is actually reflective of not just, you're not an anomaly. There's a lot of people where you are. Some of them may be dabbling in church. Some of them may not be dabbling in church. Some of them may be reading their Bible. Some of them may be privately believers, but not ready to make that bold profession or take that leap of baptism or whatever the formal process is, right? So I think as that's happening, that's where my brain went with everything you were saying, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm on board with all of that. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And speaking, you're saying, you know, the position that I'm in, you think a lot of people are in that. I think there are too, but I also, you know, remember where I was at 2-3 years ago with pretty high fidelity, and how different things are. It's a gradual
culturally.
No,
or
me personally,
Okay.
in myself, I've been on a journey. It's hard to even I mean, sometimes there's big moments or like this idea really gripped me and it kind of steered me in this direction. But I know how like what types of questions I was asking 3 years ago. And so I feel like, you know, a lot of the music kind of reflects on, I was in this place. I thought that I actually was straight. I thought I was fine, you know, and like, I mean, I'm cool. I'm not depressed. But I'm missing something deep down. I'm missing something. And I'm, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's definitely,
I think you're really close, man. And I think it might be a few books, ideas, conversations that will kind of, the information will hit you a little different. You know, it might be having conversations that aren't, I had the fortunate privilege of growing up Oriental Orthodox and then becoming a Protestant. And then so like now a lot of my friends are Catholics and Protestants and Orthodox. So when you start seeing the different streams of Christianity, you start seeing strengths and weaknesses. So like within Protestant circles, because we're in the West, we're so connected to the Enlightenment movement and the analytics and the scripture and the theology and the facts. And so much of Eastern Orthodoxy is like the mysticism and the experience and the beauty and the goodness and the art. You know, and then like the Catholics kind of in between. And by the way, my audience hates me for being friendly with everybody. But I think like sometimes we just need stuff to like hit us from different perspectives to be like,
hey, I agree,
you know?
dude. I'm, you know, again, I'm in that space.
Do you have any questions for me as someone that is kind of on the other side? Like I've wrestled with it for my first 2 years of like trying to walk into the faith. And now 22, 23 years later, married 16 years, 20 years, that like, is there anything you could ask me or you want to ask me that like can clear up anything that maybe you're wrestling with?
Well, I mean, you spoke to the apologetics point already. I would say if you have any other framework by which to bridge that gap from impersonal conscious meditation to a God that has a direct relationship with you. You know, I gave you one thought that I think, to be honest, is pretty powerful for me. So that's opened me up a little bit. But if you have anything in there, and I would also say just in general, like I'd love to know how Christianity has affected your internal state. What I see with a lot of my Christian friends is for some reason, and like for some reason, there are still things that really like bother them, whether it's career aspirations or this or that. And I constantly am like, bro, like you're doing the thing. Like what you now being now is sufficient. You're like, this is a miracle that you even exist. You know what I mean? It's beautiful. And I would love to hear just sort of how your internal state has been changed over time.
Yeah. Great question. Okay, so the first one is, I think when I think, so like we can get into the FAQ about apologetics, and I think that stuff is great and it's fascinating and it's necessary. I think you're already kind of grasping onto the broader issue of like worldview apologetics, which what makes Christianity unique, in my opinion, is the root and the fruit. So like the root of Christianity is a historical person with a historical event impacting a historical book or a collection of writings. Like that's the root of it.
Okay.
The fruit of it is ushering in a complete upside down kingdom in terms of the treatment of women, the treatment of children, the treatment of servants, of lower class, of those who are privileged. You said it earlier, the Jordan Peterson quote, like the privilege.
The price of privilege is service to others.
The service of others. That's an intrinsically Christian thought, right? So anyone that does any degree of world history and look at the world before Jesus and then look at the world after Jesus. And even in that first 300 years of Christianity not being embraced or legal, like it became embraced because of the good it did, because of the Christians fishing out the babies that were thrown in the river by the Romans, right? Like, and so I think there's a fruit, there's the root, and then what is the fruit today? Like, what is the paradigm of do unto others, love your enemies, turn the other cheek, love God with all your heart, your mind, love your neighbor as yourself. Our laws, like Samaritan, right? Like the Good Samaritan law is there's so much fruit of it that I think we can't detangle that from the root of it, and I think people want to, and I think that is where I would point to people is like I think Christian history, like the church history, is oftentimes a great apologetic for the actual argument and the worldview.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or even on how a Christian argument was used on the basis to say slavery was wrong.
Absolutely, slavery. People will say, well, the Bible was used to justify slavery, and it's like God in his magnificent will work within systems to incrementally improve systems. So polygamy is another one, right? Like you don't see an endorsement of polygamy in the Bible. You see an allowance of polygamy in the Bible. Why? Well, what was the alternative? The alternative was a highly patriarchal society where women could either be slaves, sex slaves, or destitute. And then God like allows polygamy for a season. And then you see the New Testament and you don't see polygamy. The standard to be a bishop is one man, one woman, right? So I think God incrementally works through things. And I would say slavery is in that same category. God allows this thing. And chattel slavery and what was in the scriptures are very different. They're not one and the same.
Now, I was just going to say the argument, the basis of, hey, like, why is this wrong?
Yeah.
It's like, well, we're all human beings made in the image of God. So this dynamic is
And the abolitionists, like a lot of the abolitionists were Christians.
Right.
So I would say that in terms of your second question is like, how has my internal state been different? I think there is this, and I'm writing a book about this. I'm writing a book about godly ambition, right? And this cognitive dissonance that Christians often find themselves in, which is like everything about the culture, about your own upbringing, about your theology will create this tension to want to feel guilty for being successful, or feel guilty for wanting to be stable financially, right? Or feel guilty for wanting to make the most of your time, talent, and treasure. Yet there's something innate wired in us to want to usher in beauty and goodness and do things for the sake of others. But that unchecked can turn into get rich quick. You start justifying it, right? And so you have these or the prosperity gospel. So what I'm filtering through in my own life is that contentment of like, I was happy 12 years ago working with adults with developmental disabilities. I was so pumped. Like my life was great, and my life is great now. And apparently to a certain fragment of people online, I'm helpful to Christianity going further. Great. But like, I love just being a dad and a husband, and I don't have that validation you talk about, right? Like from like that you used to have for music. Like I'm right there with you. Like I don't need to prove anything to anyone else. I had a line in one of my songs like, I already feel like I'm plenty famous. Like I don't need any more attention. I like where I live. I like my house. I like my car. I like my friends. I'm good. So it's like that godliness with contentment leads to great gain, right? So like I think if there's any way I could summarize that is like I grew up very poor with a need to overcompensate and validate myself to others. And that is not there anymore. I don't care. I don't need the attention. I don't need anyone to acknowledge me. And even when people do, it's like that it's truly humbling. Like it's truly humbling to think Jordan Peterson knew who I was. That is truly humbling, but I didn't need that. I didn't walk away going, and now I'm validated, right? Like it was like, oh, that was like a nice, pleasant surprise, and it made me feel good. You coming here to do this podcast made me feel good in the same way.
It made me feel good, and
right?
I was like, hey, shout out Ruslan.
And so that is the second part of your question is like, I truly believe that when we do good and we serve people from a place of wanting to glorify God, and we make ourselves an asset to our friends, family with useful skills, a lot of this stuff works itself out. The issue is that we live in a world that's completely polar opposite than that. And people just struggle from consumerism, overspending, living in debt, being poor and then getting money and then losing it, and not, like, there's so many distractions from the internet and all these things. And so it's like, if I can just help people be grounded through a healthy ambition that isn't me centered, but is other centered. And I think that can help usher in like people using their time, talent, and treasure for the glory of God.
Yeah. No, I think, I think that's beautiful. I feel that personally. I feel it. Like I you know, and I think a big part of it is gratitude practice. So if you want to talk about narratives, I mean, I could give you a depiction of my life that is very woe is me if you'd like.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I could also have a narrative that's catered towards all the things that I do have and that I'm blessed to have. That both are true.
Both are true.
Both are true. It's the narrative by which I orient my life towards.
Well,
and
it's the identity that you give yourself.
That too.
Yeah.
That too.
Yeah, because if you're like, yo, this happened, this happens in these bad relationships, my mom and dad got divorced. I'm sure there's way darker stuff to your life as well, right? Oh, like, I'm a victim. Things are bad. I've been sinned against, right? Like, you've probably been sinned against. I've been sinned against.
Yeah.
But the reality is you don't let those things define you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so this is, and again, this is like, have you read Atomic Habits?
Yep.
Okay. So in Atomic Habits, it talks about how true change, people want output change, right? And there's those 3 circles, and the outputs and the results is what everybody obsesses with, right? But it goes, no, you don't, the outputs, you don't consume about the outputs. You consume yourself with the systems and the processes that you develop that overflow from the identity you have. So like, I don't beat myself up for having dessert.
Yeah, you're on the journey.
I'm on the journey and I'm part of the process, but my identity is like, I'm an athlete, and an athlete can have dessert. And an athlete will get back in the gym and I'll be fine. If I have dessert, if I have a bad cheat day, it's fine. My identity is so rooted in, like, I've always been an athlete. I've always played basketball. I've been lifting since I was in 7th grade. 7th grade, joined a weightlifting club, right? So if I'm an athlete, therefore my processes is I have a gym that I built in the backyard. I'll show you when we leave. Got a gym in the backyard. And then my outcomes are that of what an athlete gets. I get stronger. I get in better shape. But I think to go a level deeper is, what are my beliefs about myself? My beliefs are that I'm a sinner that Jesus loved enough to save me. My beliefs are that I am declared the righteousness of God because of the work on the cross. I'm a friend of God. I'm more than a conqueror. My beliefs determine my identity, right? And I think that's the one thing that I thought Atomic Habits was missing.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't take subjective, abstract ideas and just be like, I'm an astronaut.
Yeah.
Like, who says who, right? But if I'm like, no, I'm the righteousness of God. Like, I'm the righteousness of Christ. You know, I'm a friend of God's. Like, and those are all the things the scriptures declare. So it's no longer my subjective experience. It's what the Bible says that I am. And then from that, I flow out to my identity.
Yeah.
And again, I'm exploring this stuff in the book. But so those are the aspects that, like, and I don't think enough Christians believe this. I think too many Christians are like, I'm a wretched sinner. I'm an awful person. I'm terrible. I am the worst of the worst. That's not what the scriptures say.
Yo, actually, well, you know, it's so crazy. I have a problem with this language of love yourself for the reason that it's like, you know, love yourself. It's like, but you're not who you could be. So it lacks something. And so what you're saying is Christianity is like, I'm not what I could be, but then there's the grace component. So it's the love yourself, if it came with the grace component, but also a commitment to, so love yourself has the grace component, but it doesn't have the commitment to betterment. And so but I do think that Christianity provides that framework.
It's and both.
Yeah. And I think that, and this is just a much more broad thing, but I think that the more calibrated your foundational belief systems are to truth, when you live them out, they provide the fruits, which I'm sure you would 100% agree with. But if I believe that ice cream is nutritionally good for me, right? That's a wrong belief, but live it out and see how your health, you know, and so part of the pursuit that I'm on is constantly trying to tinker and rework and reorient myself to truth.
That's good.
To do that. And so
that's great, man.
Yeah, I would encourage people, I guess, to, you know, it's just like maybe a parting word is just encourage people to, you can have the humility to be wrong about anything. And it's if you are looking at your life and you're like, wow, I have really robust, trusting friendships. I have a relationship with a significant other that is robust. If I have peace of mind, if I have then something about your core belief system is probably true. There was a period in time where I thought I was very right, and my relationships did not reflect that. I had, you know what I'm saying? I didn't have the type of friendships that I had. And at some point I had to go, yeah, okay, it's probably me.
It's probably me.
It's probably me. Yeah. And then, you know, that work can start. So I would encourage that. If you feel like something's in disarray, you know what I'm saying? Like,
that's good,
start to question and give yourself some grace for being wrong.
Appreciate it, man. That's great. Ladies and gentlemen, Nate Rose, check him out on all platforms. We're out of here. Peace.
After the incredible success of our Bless God prayer journal, many of you guys began to ask for something that had a planner. And so we combined our Bless God prayer journal with a brand new leadership planner that jam-packs the same things from our prayer journal with a planner, goal setting, leadership meeting, and notes. With the next pages, you can see different sections right along here of this leadership planner where you can start out with actionable goals, 12 months of calendar, our original prayer journal prompts, our leadership journal with the proven problem solution framework, and of course, just free write notes. This leadership planner is based off of Matthew 25:14-30, which of course is the parable of the talents. The vision of the planner is to help you make the most of your time, talent, and treasure. Head over to blessgod.shop and get yours today. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.